Many origin stories place humans at the center of a universe built for their benefit. The oldest recorded myth suggests the opposite. In this worldview, the gods invented us as a biological tool, engineered from clay to carry a burden they no longer wanted to bear. To the ancient Sumerians, the cosmos functioned as a massive, high-maintenance agricultural estate. Keeping it operational required constant administrative oversight and grueling physical labor. The story begins with Namu, the uncreated primordial sea. Before the existence of time or space, this saltwater ocean was the only entity in the void. Namu brought forth the first structures, An, the sky, and Ki, the earth. In this earliest phase, however, they refused together into a single, immovable cosmic mountain known as the Hersog. Creation was born from physical congestion. To make the universe habitable, the gods had to perform a violent act of engineering to separate these layers and create functional space. Trapped in the dark, cramped space between heaven and earth, An and Ki produced a son, Enlil, the god of air and storm. Enlil acted as a wedge of expanding pressure. He brutally separated his parents, carrying off the earth as his own domain, while his father, An, carried off the heavens. This act of cosmic violence finalized the Anki, the blueprint for the ordered Sumerian universe. But this new order was inherently fragile. Without constant dredging of its rivers and tilling of its soil, the earthly realm threatened to collapse back into primordial chaos. Order was an artificial state. The survival of the cosmos depended entirely on the continued application of forced labor. The gods divided themselves into two classes. At the top were the Anunnaki, the senior deities who functioned as upper management and demanded to live in leisure and abundance. Serving them were the Igigi, a junior class of gods. As this text indicates, they were forced into a life of drudgery, dredging watercourses to feed their superiors. For 40 years they bore this burden, digging silt and piling mountains of sediment without rest. The breaking point finally came when the Igigi burned their agricultural tools and surrounded the house of Enlil. This full-scale mutiny brought the entire cosmic economy to a standstill. The first great crisis in recorded mythology was a massive blue-collar labor strike. Facing a total collapse of the cosmic order, Enlil summoned the god of wisdom, Enki, to find a way to end the revolt. Enki proposed a highly pragmatic administrative solution. The gods would manufacture a new biological worker to take over the agricultural toil and free the Igigi from their service. To create this worker, the gods slaughtered the rebellion's ringleaders, using their divine blood and flesh as a biological base. Mixed with the clay of the abyss, our intended portion was fixed from creation. We would carry the service of the gods for all time. The gods engineered human beings as a replacement workforce, built from the biological salvage of a dead mutineer. The Igigi welcomed the creation of man with ecstasy. By transferring their tools to human hands, they finally attained the same state of indolent leisure enjoyed by the senior gods. This represents a total inversion of later mythological tropes. In the Sumerian tradition, being removed from the divine garden and replaced by a servant was seen as a profound blessing. The heavy yoke of irrigating the fields and building the temples was permanently shifted onto the shoulders of mankind. This ancient myth mirrored the harsh reality of life in Lower Mesopotamia. Survival in this environment was impossible without massive communal effort to dig and repair the irrigation canals that held back the floods. The Sumerians believed their agricultural toil was a literal prerequisite for the gods' survival. Every canal cleared and every field tilled by a human hand provided the meals that kept the deities fed in their temples. The noise, the struggle, and the exhaustion of human life define our intended purpose. We were designed to be the laborers who maintain the universe so the gods can rest. The Sumerian cosmos was a hostile, unpredictable place, driven by raw natural forces and governed by brilliant, volatile deities. At the center of this chaos stood Enki, the god of sweet water and wisdom and the chief architect of the natural world. He alone engineered the island of Dilmun, transforming a barren wasteland into a lush, perfectly balanced biological utopia. But this paradise lacked permanence. It functioned flawlessly only as long as Enki maintained his own benevolence and strict self-control. The universe hung by a thread, because the gods who engineered its stability were slaves to their own physical urges. Enki possessed a fatal flaw, a ravenous appetite. Wandering through his garden, he impulsively consumed 8 newly created, highly sacred plants. We can see the immediate fallout in the surviving translation of the myth. The mother goddess Ninhursag curses Enki with death. 8 of his organs rapidly fail, and the entire cosmos grinds to a halt without its architect. The text centers on a specific linguistic pun. To heal Enki's failing rib, or T in Sumerian, the mother goddess generates Ninti, whose name translates to both Lady of the Rib and Lady of Life. It takes the desperate intervention of a fox to broker a deal, allowing the mother goddess to give birth to 8 distinct goddesses, each prescribed to cure 1 of Enki's 8 failing organs. The foundational rules of human biology and healing emerged as an emergency patch to fix a god's reckless gluttony. Centuries later, we finally leave that mythical garden behind and arrive in the sprawling, dusty human metropolis of ancient Uruk. Uruk was overseen by Inanna, an ambitious patron goddess who desired absolute supremacy for her city. To achieve this, she needed the May, over 100 divine decrees acting as the invisible source code required to run a functioning civilization. This 6-column clay tablet is the physical record of that software, representing humanity's first attempt to document cultural traits. The carved wedges list specific rules: the institution of kingship, the framework of law, the techniques of crafts, and the creation of music. But Uruk's potential was locked behind a cosmic paywall. Enki hoarded these decrees in his distant temple, meaning human progress required either extreme divine charity or a daring theft. Inanna travels to the ancient city of Eridu, stepping directly into Enki's watery abyss, the Abzu. She avoids outright force, employing a brilliant strategy that exploits Enki's heavily documented lack of self-control. She orchestrates a lavish, irresistible feast, intentionally plying the aging water god with massive quantities of very strong, intoxicating beer. The trap works perfectly. In a moment of drunken joviality and complete recklessness, Enki hands over every single decree governing human society. The entire foundation of human sociology and law was surrendered in a moment of intoxicated weakness. The hangover eventually hits. Enki wakes up sober, looks at his empty sanctuary, and realizes he has literally given away global supremacy. Inanna is already fleeing, having loaded the stolen decrees onto her boat of heaven to sail home to Uruk. Furious, he dispatches wave after wave of terrifying abyssal monsters to intercept her boat at 7 different river checkpoints. But Inanna is prepared. Her vizier, Ninshibur, mounts a violent defense, physically repelling the sea monsters at every turn. The boat breaches the city limits of Uruk. Amidst mass jubilation, the divine decrees are permanently unloaded into the human domain. Looking at the multi-tier mud brick ruins of these ziggurats today, we see the reality of the massive cities the Sumerians built with this stolen knowledge. Sumerian civilization was the result of a calculated cosmic heist, won through ambition, cunning, and the violent defiance of the old gods. To the ancient Mesopotamians, the universe was a rigid pyramid. At the peak sat the supreme gods, ruling in total leisure. Below them was a vast, unbridgeable gap, and at the base were humans, temporary, biological tools. Humans weren't created for their own sake. They were sculpted from river mud for a single, grueling purpose: to perform the heavy agricultural labor that the gods found too exhausting. But the tools were flawed. As humanity multiplied, their settlements became crowded and loud. Eventually, the sheer volume of their noise and clamor drifted into the heavens, preventing the supreme god, Enlil, from sleeping. Because the gods viewed humanity purely as a labor force, this disruption made them instantly disposable. If the workers were too loud to permit the masters rest, the masters would simply wipe them away. Enlil issued a final, irrevocable decree. A global flood would be unleashed to permanently exterminate the human race.
But the god of wisdom, Enki, secretly broke ranks. He warned a pious king named Utnapishtim of the coming storm, instructing him to build a massive ark to preserve the seed of life. For 6 days, the storm battered the world, dissolving humanity back into the clay from which they were made. When the waters finally receded, the gods felt the sting of the world's silence. Regretting the total destruction of their workforce, they rewarded Utnapishtim and his wife with the one thing no human was ever meant to have: eternal life. In a world defined by the absolute boundary between the mortal and the divine, Utnapishtim was now a living contradiction. He was a human who had cheated death, proving that the rule of mortality could, under the right circumstances, be broken. This contradiction haunts the city of Uruk, ruled by King Gilgamesh. He is a physical anomaly, 2/3 god, yet tragically tethered to the earth by his 1/3 mortality. Alongside his companion, the wild man Enkidu, Gilgamesh decides that if they cannot have eternal life, they will at least have eternal fame. They choose to spend their limited years violently challenging the limits of the world. They journey to the forbidden cedar forest, a realm reserved for the gods, to challenge its guardian, a terrifying monster named Humbaba. In a battle that defies divine will, the heroes overcome Humbaba's paralyzing auras and decapitate the monster. By slaying a servant of the gods, Gilgamesh and Enkidu convince themselves of a fatal lie, that their raw strength is enough to erase the line between mortals and the divine. The gods do not tolerate such arrogance. When Gilgamesh rejects the goddess Ishtar, she asserts her authority by unleashing the bull of heaven to trample the city of Uruk. The heroes slaughter the bull, but Enkidu takes the defiance a step too far, hurling its severed thigh at the goddess in a final act of blasphemy. Faster, more urgent tone. This time, the gods do not send monsters. They simply decree that one of the heroes must die to restore the cosmic hierarchy. Enkidu is struck with a wasting illness. In his final hours, he is plagued by visions of the underworld, a house of dust where former kings are stripped of their crowns and forced to eat clay in the dark. Enkidu's slow, agonizing death is the god's final answer. It proves that no amount of heroic strength can insulate a human from the inescapable rule as mortality. Terrified by the sight of his friend's corpse, Gilgamesh strips off his royal purple and flees into the wild, consumed by the fear of his own inevitable decay. He is now obsessed with a single destination, the home of Utnapishtim. If one man had managed to stay the hand of death, Gilgamesh would find him and demand to know how it was done. He runs through total darkness and crosses the toxic waters of death, pushing his body to its absolute limits to reach the flood survivor. When he finally meets Utnapishtim, Gilgamesh expects a task, a trial of strength that will allow him to earn his way out of the grave. But Utnapishtim's answer is a final blow. His immortality was not a prize for a hero. It was a unique, unrepeatable gift, given to apologize for a catastrophe that will never happen again. Gilgamesh cannot even stay a week, much less live forever. His failure cements the truth. The exception was never a path for the rest of humanity. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk an exhausted, defeated man. He looks at the sun-dried bricks of his city, his quest for a personal escape from death entirely unfulfilled. A moment of wonder. But as he walks the perimeter of his city, he realizes that while his body will rot, the great walls he built will remain to protect his people long after he is gone. He records the story of his failure onto clay tablets, ensuring that his name and his struggle are meticulously preserved in the city's foundations. We may be built from the clay, but the things we build outlive us. Gilgamesh never became a god, but by raising his walls and recording his story, he found the only kind of permanence a human is ever allowed to keep.
Many modern concepts of the afterlife center on a moral scorecard, a final sorting mechanism where the good are rewarded and the wicked are punished. Ancient Mesopotamian belief offered no such comfort. Their underworld, known as Kur, was a bleak cavern located deep beneath the earth. Here, kings and beggars share the exact same fate, sitting in the pitch dark, eating dry clay, and wearing a coat of bird feathers for clothing. Ereshkigal, the ruler of this domain, sits at the center of an absolute indifferent bureaucracy. She is a fierce, grieving queen who enforces the laws of the dead with cold precision. Because the Sumerian afterlife was a rigidly legislated system, death functioned as a rigged trap. No amount of earthly wealth or righteousness could bypass the regulations of the cavern. Curious tone, Inanna, the ambitious queen of heaven, decided to challenge the system directly. She made the unprecedented choice to descend into the earth and attempt to conquer her dark sister's domain. Inanna prepared for the journey by arming herself with the Mi, her divine powers physically manifested as lapis lazuli beads, golden rings, and a royal crown. She wore her authority as physical protection. This invasion created a unique stress test for cosmic law, forcing a confrontation between the universe's most vibrant force of life and the absolute laws of death. To enter her sister's palace, Inanna had to submit to the first law of the underworld, the law of surrender, enforced by the 7 gates of Kur. At every gate, the keeper refuses passage until she pays a toll, surrendering one piece of her divine Mi. As she descends deeper into the earth, her protections are systematically stripped away, transitioning her from an untouchable deity to a vulnerable entity. By the time she reaches Ereshkigal's throne room, Inanna is completely naked and powerless. The judges of the underworld pronounce her dead. She is struck down, turned into a corpse, and left hanging lifelessly from a massive iron hook on the cold stone wall. This execution proved that the underworld's jurisdiction was absolute. Below the earth, even a god is just meat. The god of wisdom, Enki, eventually discovered a bureaucratic loophole. He crafted 2 liminal, sexless beings from the dirt under his fingernails, entities that existed outside the strict binary of life and death, allowing them to bypass the gates entirely. These beings secured Inanna's body by showing the grieving Ereshkigal empathy. Grateful for this rare comfort, the queen offered them a gift, and they claimed Inanna's corpse from the wall. They revived the goddess with the food and water of life, but her release triggered the second law, equivalent exchange. No one can leave the system without providing a living substitute to take their place. Inanna began her ascent to the surface, accompanied by a swarm of Gala demons, relentless enforcers hunting for her replacement. She arrived in her home city to find her husband, Dumuzid, sitting comfortably on his magnificent throne, dressed in fine clothes instead of mourning her death. Enraged, Inanna ordered the demons to drag him down to the abyss. The accounting of the underworld must always balance. Escaping the clutches of death requires paying the debt with another life. The gods weren't alone in testing this system. Back in the mortal cities, human heroes Gilgamesh and Enkidu also pushed the boundaries of the dead. When Gilgamesh accidentally dropped 2 sacred items into the underworld, his companion Enkidu arrogantly volunteered to enter the cavern and fetch them. Gilgamesh pleaded with his friend to follow the strict protocols of the dead. Avoid wearing clean clothes, refrain from making noise, and don't draw attention to yourself. Enkidu ignored every warning. He treated the underworld like a physical enemy he could conquer, aggressively breaking every protocol of the realm. By acting like a living warrior among the dead, he triggered the 3rd law, the law of belonging. The system registered him as a hostile intruder and permanently claimed him. Physical strength meant nothing against the bureaucracy of death. Ignorance of the law guaranteed eternal imprisonment. The sun god eventually opened a brief crack in the earth, allowing Enkidu's ghost to deliver a final message to the living. Enkidu describes a world where the physical body rots, the dead eat literal garbage for nourishment, and existence is a joyless void of dust. Ancient tablets reveal the only relief in this environment. The dead relied on libations, descendants pouring water down clay pipes just to ease their terrible thirst. For the first urban civilizations, death served as the great equalizer.
Salvation from the dark came through the hope that they would endure in the memories and rituals of those left behind in the sun.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy mythology, be sure to check out our other videos, and if you would like us to cover a specific culture's myths, just let us know in the comments. And remember, you are awesome.
Look at the geography of ancient Egypt. You have this incredibly fertile, vibrant ribbon of green hugging the Nile, and immediately beyond it, an endless, hostile wasteland of sand. For the people living there, daily existence was a precarious island of life, entirely surrounded by a vast sea of death. They projected that physical reality onto the cosmos. Before the universe existed, they believed there was only noon, a terrifying, infinite, and utterly silent ocean of dark, formless chaos. No light, no bottom, just a boundless void. Securing a foothold for order within that void became the defining obsession of Egyptian life. Every structure they built and every ritual they performed served as a bulwark against the inevitable return of the abyss. To answer that, the ancient Egyptians didn't rely on a single rigid origin story. Over thousands of years, their greatest religious centers developed three entirely distinct mechanisms for how reality was forged. By examining these three paths of creation, we can see exactly how the Egyptian mind engineered a universe designed to keep the darkness at bay. Our first mechanism comes from the city of Hermopolis. Here, creation is a violent, almost chemical convergence of raw elemental forces. They envisioned the Ogdoad, a group of 8 gods paired off into male and female counterparts. But these weren't humans. They were personifications of the chaotic void itself: infinite space, primordial darkness, hiddenness, and the deep waters. In this model, these volatile forces swirl blindly through the dark until they collide. They react, build friction, and eventually compress into a critical mass. That violent compression formed a cosmic egg. When that egg finally cracked open, it unleashed the sun god, bringing the very first spark of light and heat into a dead universe. The Hermopolitan story argues that the engine of reality couldn't be built from scratch. The universe had to be jump-started by harnessing the destructive power of chaos itself. Meanwhile, in the city of Heliopolis, the focus shifted from elemental physics to biological lineage. Here, a self-created sun god named Atum willed himself into existence, standing on the very first mound of earth to rise from the waters. This diagram illustrates the Heliopolitan system. At the top, the sun god acts as the singular origin point. From that solitary position, he reproduces, generating the first elements, Shu and Tefnut. Tracing downward, reproduction cascades into the foundational cosmos, Osiris, Isis, Set, and Nephthys. This mechanism provided a physical, genealogical blueprint for the universe, anchoring abstract gods into a tangible cosmic family tree that human rulers could claim descent from. Looking at this catalog of Egyptian deities, we find Ptah in the bottom left. He is the patron god of craftsmen and architects, and the center of our third creation mechanism, originating in the city of Memphis. The Memphite theology introduces the concept of logos, or divine reason. In this framework, the universe requires neither a chemical collision nor physical reproduction. Instead, creation is an intellectual act. Ptah conceives of the complexities of the universe within his heart, the true seat of human intelligence. Once the design is complete, he speaks those thoughts into existence. He physically manifests reality through vocabulary, naming the world into being. This equates the mind of a creator to the plan of an architect. In Memphis, the universe was not birthed, it was designed, suggesting that clear thought and spoken names were the primary tools used to carve a habitable world out of the void. The Egyptian mind unified these distinct paths. A functioning universe required all three: the raw elemental spark from Hermopolis, a tangible divine lineage from Heliopolis, and the intellectual blueprint from Memphis. Together, these mechanisms established Ma'at. This was the ultimate goal of creation, the supreme embodiment of truth, balance, and absolute cosmic order. Ma'at is the successful, hard-won state of structure.
It's the architecture that keeps the dark, terrifying waters of the void from rushing back in and drowning the habitable world. Creation was a daily, repetitive labor. Every hour required an active defense of balance to prevent the world from sliding back into the waiting darkness. Every single sunrise was a repetition of that original triumph. It was a daily victory of order pushing back the void, resetting the stage for the dramatic myths of the gods who would rule this newly forged world. The sun was a living deity that physically transformed over the course of a day to mirror a human lifespan. At dawn, the sun manifested as Khepri, the scarab beetle pushing the sun disk over the horizon to represent new life and emergence. By dusk, the sun became the aging autumn. As he sank below the horizon, the god entered the Duat, the terrifying Egyptian underworld. To navigate this landscape of supernatural snares and demons, Ra traveled aboard a protective solar bark. Waiting in the deepest trenches of the Duat was Apophis, the giant serpent embodying the void. Apophis had no desire to conquer the world or rule the gods. Its sole motivation was to entirely unmake reality and swallow the light. Every single night, Ra and his divine defenders engaged in a desperate, violent battle, forced to slaughter the serpent to survive until dawn. These were the absolute stakes of this invisible cosmic war. If the serpent was not defeated every night, the sun would never rise again. While the void posed a constant external threat, chaos could also trigger internally when humanity rebelled and disrespected the gods. To enforce his will on Earth, Ra deployed the Eye of Ra, a terrifying feminine extension of his own power used for divine retribution. He unleashed this weapon upon humanity in the form of Sekhmet, the fierce lioness goddess. Sekhmet's initial mandate for justice very soon spiraled into a horrific, senseless massacre as her terrifying bloodlust became completely uncontrollable. Ra realized too late that his own weapon had become a threat to Ma'at, pushing the human race to the brink of extinction. To save humanity, Ra ordered the survivors to brew massive amounts of beer and dye it blood red with pomegranate seeds. Sekhmet, deceived by the appearance of the red beer, gorged herself until she fell into a drunken stupor, eventually awakening as a pacified, gentle deity. External chaos is dangerous, but untethered divine justice can be just as apocalyptic if left unchecked. The dual lessons of Apophis and Sekhmet encapsulate the core of the Egyptian worldview. Existence requires violently pushing back the dark every day, while simultaneously restraining one's own destructive wrath. This tension between absolute violence and gentle nurturing mirrored the harsh, unforgiving realities of the Egyptian desert. To the ancient Egyptians, the vibrant desert morning served as the physical proof that the terrifying balance of the universe had been successfully maintained for one more day. Ancient Egyptian geography is defined by a brutal contrast. A narrow, fertile river valley is immediately surrounded by hundreds of miles of hostile, barren desert. This environment generated two opposing principles. First is Ma'at, the cosmic order, truth, and structural stability required for civilization. Opposing it is Isfet, the creeping threat of chaos, encroaching desert storms, and the natural tendency of the world to fall into ruin. This physical tension created a psychological mandate. The state had to actively and perpetually hold back chaos, or the universe would collapse. Early Egyptian civilization faced a severe logistical problem, justifying absolute, centralized rule over a vast and highly populated territory. The pharaoh served as a mandatory ontological mechanism, a living linchpin holding Ma'at together on Earth. But human bodies fail. When kings die, the transition of power creates a vacuum, the exact moment of vulnerability where Isfet can dismantle the state. The priesthood utilized the tragedy of Osiris to solve this vulnerability, transforming political succession into a cosmic necessity. The Osiris myth functioned as a sophisticated piece of theological technology, engineered to guarantee state survival. According to the myth, Osiris was the primeval king who brought agriculture, law, and civilization to Egypt. Bearing the crook and flail, he established the baseline for a functioning state. His brother, Set, is the embodiment of Isfet, the chaotic, unbridled force of the desert and storms, driven by jealousy of the ordered state. Set executes his betrayal by constructing a chest tailored exactly to his brother's physical dimensions, turning an object of measurement into a weapon. Set seals Osiris in lead and casts him into the Nile. This assassination caused a systemic collapse. The death of the king marked the temporary victory of chaos over order. The recovery of the state begins with Isis. Applying her magical prowess and absolute devotion, she scours the earth for her husband's remains. Discovering the body, Set retaliates by dismembering Osiris into 42 distinct pieces to ensure permanent destruction. This map of the Nile demonstrates how those 42 abstract fragments map onto the 42 regional districts, or nomes, of the ancient Egyptian state. Isis recovered the pieces and bound the body back together, establishing the etiology of mummification. The central technology of this resurrection is the Djed pillar, representing the restored backbone of Osiris. With the body intact, Isis conceives their son, Horus. This posthumous conception is a miracle, proving that royal lineage can be extracted from death itself. Mummification served as an ideological declaration. The physical integrity of the ruler guaranteed the structural integrity of the nation. This diagram frames the 80-year conflict between Horus and Set as a legal trial before the Ennead, disputing the rights of biological inheritance against pure strength. The legal dispute escalated into physical trials. In one instance, both gods transform into massive hippopotami, battling for dominance at the bottom of the Nile. In a stone boat race, Set relies on brute force to launch a mountain peak that immediately sinks. Horus uses wood painted as stone to stay afloat, demonstrating how intellect defeats raw power. The combat includes biological warfare. Set gouges out Horus's eye, a symbolic stripping of royal virility and divine vision. The god Thoth restores the eye, transforming it into the Wadjet, the ultimate symbol of healing, protection, and lunar renewal. Horus's ultimate victory legally codifies that Ma'at, intellect, order, and rightful inheritance, must always subjugate the raw power of Isfet. The resolution of the myth created a permanent, cyclical blueprint for the transfer of political power. The living pharaoh rules as the earthly incarnation of Horus, actively fighting back the borders of chaos. This king is visually and politically fused to the victorious falcon god. Upon death, the pharaoh descends to the underworld to become Osiris. Within the Duat, the deceased pharaoh now serves as the eternal judge and guarantor of agricultural renewal. To the ancient Egyptian, there is never a vacancy on the throne. Power simply shifts between the visible and invisible realms. The Osiris myth eliminates the chaos of succession by making the transition of power an act of cosmic renewal. The state successfully aligned the biological vulnerability of a human ruler with the indestructible cycles of the sun, the river, and the harvest. This ideological system supported a continuous civilization for over 3 millennia. The symbols of this system, namely the Djed, the Eye of Horus, and the dual crowns, became the visual language of absolute authority. The ancient Egyptians engineered an ideological architecture designed specifically to achieve eternity. To the ancient Egyptians, the moment of physical death launched the most dangerous undertaking of a person's existence. Entering the underworld meant risking the second death, the absolute and final annihilation of the soul, from which there was no return. Survival depended on a shattered identity. The Egyptian soul was a complex mechanism of 9 distinct parts that fragmented the second the heart stopped beating. This is the Khat, the physical body. Because the spirit required a permanent anchor to return to, mummification became a requirement for eternal life. Once the body was secured, the active elements of the soul could begin their journey. The Ka, representing the vital life force, and the Ba, the unique personality and consciousness of the deceased. Inside the chest, priests left one organ untouched, the Ib, or heart. It functioned as a biological flight recorder, carrying the full memory of a person's moral choices into the afterlife. To ensure the deceased could physically rise again, priests tucked specialized amulets into the linen wrappings. This is the Djed pillar, a symbolic spine designed to grant the spirit the stability to stand upright in the next world. With the anchor of the body, the record of the heart, and the magic of the amulets, the fragmented soul awakens to face a landscape of terror. As the Ka and Ba leave the tomb, they cross into a surreal parallel dimension called Biduat. Their guide through this realm is Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming. The Duat is a geography of shifting sands, lakes of fire, and gates guarded by monstrous entities armed with knives. This journey mirrors the sun god Ra's nightly battle against the forces of chaos. The soul's survival is tied to the cosmic cycle. To reach the afterlife, the deceased must successfully navigate the dark alongside the sun. Every soul carried a customized arsenal of maps and spells known as the Book of the Dead. These papyrus scrolls provided the specific magical tools needed to navigate the Duat. These hieroglyphs contain the secret names of the gatekeepers. By speaking the Ren, the true name, of a guardian, the deceased stripped the demon of its power and forced the path open. While magic and perseverance allow a soul to survive the physical traps of the underworld, the final gate leads to a trial of character. The journey culminates at the monumental Hall of Judgment, where Osiris, the god of the afterlife, presides over the fate of the dead. Here, the deceased stands before 42 divine judges to recite the negative confessions. They must declare their innocence of 42 specific sins, from theft and murder to lying and arrogance. In the center, Anubis prepares the final test. He places the Ib, the heart, on a massive golden scale, opposite the white feather of Mot, symbol of cosmic truth. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom, stands by to permanently record the irreversible measurement. This single moment of balance dictates whether the soul achieves eternity or faces immediate total destruction. A heart heavy with sin is cast to the creature waiting beneath the scales, Ammit, the devourer. She consumes the heart, triggering a second death and erasing the soul from existence. A balanced heart, however, earns the soul the title of true of voice. The Ka and Ba finally reunite, transforming the deceased into a radiant, immortal spirit known as the Ak. The justified spirit enters the field of reeds, a golden, suffering-free reflection of the Nile Valley, living in eternal harmony with the gods. This vast landscape of monsters, spells, and scales reflects a profound conviction that a life lived with truth and justice is the only force powerful enough to conquer death. In many traditions, a divine word is enough to spark existence. But the Chinese cosmos began with agonizing physical labor. This is the state of Hunden. It was a cosmic egg where the heavy and light, the dark and the bright, were locked together in a suffocating, unrefined storm. For 18,000 years, the primordial giant Pangu developed inside this chaos. When he finally woke, he found himself trapped in a lightless, airless void. Pangu swung a massive axe with all his might. He shattered the egg, cracking the chaos wide open and creating the first moment of differentiation. The pure light yang rose to become the heavens, while the heavy, murky yin settled below to form the earth. This order was not a gift from the gods. It was a state Pangu had to forcefully wrestle from the void. For another 18,000 years, Pangu stood between the rising sky and the sinking earth. He used his own body as a pillar, pushing them apart each day to ensure the weight of the heavens didn't crush the world back into chaos. By the time the universe stabilized, Pangu had reached his limit. He did not survive to rule the world he had built. He simply died of sheer physical exhaustion. As he fell, his body transformed. His breath became wind and clouds. His voice turned into thunder. His left eye ignited the sun. His right eye became the moon. These are the stairs of Mount Tai. In the mythology, Pangu's limbs and body collapsed to form the 5 sacred mountains, providing the physical architecture of the Chinese world. The rivers, the forests, and the stars all grew from the remains of a god who gave everything to make the universe tangible. The earth was stable, but silent. The half-dragon goddess Nua wandered through this landscape, feeling a profound sense of loneliness in a world that had no one to appreciate its beauty. She sat at the banks of the Yellow River and began digging into the yellow clay. She handcrafted the first individual humans, meticulously shaping their limbs and breathing life into them. The task was grueling. To populate the entire earth, Nua eventually dipped a rope into the mud and flung the droplets across the land. As the sun dried the mud, each drop stood up as a living person. This dual creation offered an explanation for social class. The handcrafted figures became the noble leaders, while those born from the spray of the rope became the ordinary commoners. Nua spent her strength until she could no longer stand. She had filled the silence of the earth through the labor of her own hands. That silence was broken when warring deities shattered the pillars of heaven. The sky tore open, the corners of the earth collapsed, and the cosmos began to unravel. Fire and water raced across the 9 provinces. Surging cosmic floods and ferocious beasts threatened to erase humanity before it could even begin its history. Nua returned to her forge. She smelted 5 colored stones to mend the cracks in the sky, tirelessly patching the dome of the heavens as it burned. To replace the broken pillars, she severed the legs of a giant turtle and set them at the 4 corners of the world, propping up the sky to prevent it from ever falling again. She blocked the floods with the ashes of reeds and fought back the black dragon. When the world was finally pacified, Nua laid down to rest and transformed into a vast mountain range. The Chinese universe exists in a state of constant, fragile balance, held together by the physical remains of the gods who sacrificed themselves to build it. As the era of creation ended, the San Huang Wudi, the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors, emerged to pull humanity out of primitive vulnerability. Fuxi labored to decode the patterns of the stars and the lines on the back of a tortoise. He engineered the first system of writing and the trigrams of the I Ching, preserving knowledge on oracle bones like this one. Shennong, the divine farmer, invented the wooden plow to break the earth. He suffered through the testing of hundreds of toxic herbs on his own body to discover the secrets of medicine. The Yellow Emperor and his wife Lizu organized the chaotic tribes into a society. They mastered the laborious process of silk cultivation, turning a wild resource into an industry. To govern this growing civilization, the Yellow Emperor standardized the calendar and implemented the first system of coined money for trade. Every pillar of civilization was engineered through the relentless ingenuity, physical trials, and literal pain of these demigods. This new order was threatened by the warlord Qi Yu, who possessed advanced bronze weaponry and a mastery of the martial arts. The Yellow Emperor met him in a massive, dusty clash. His victory in this battle secured the future of the Han Chinese people and signaled the transition into the first recorded dynasties. This victory marks the point where mythology becomes history, passing the baton to rulers like Yu the Great. These stories suggest that the mandate of heaven is earned through immense physical exertion and the willingness to sacrifice everything for the collective. The Chinese heavens operate as an inescapable, meticulously organized corporate government. Every soul exists under the constant oversight of this massive celestial administration. At the absolute peak of this hierarchy sits the board of directors, the 3 pure ones. They are the formless, primordial embodiments of the Tao, or the Way. They reside in the highest heavens, representing the pure cosmic energy that set the foundational rules for all existence. But the pure ones don't handle the day-to-day operations. That falls to the chief executive, the Jade Emperor. Sitting directly below them, he rules as the supreme administrator of heaven and earth. His heavenly court is a fully functioning civil service. There are specific celestial ministries for everything from thunder to fire and even plague. The officials in these departments continuously monitor the mortal realm. Every single human action is meticulously recorded into vast cosmic ledgers. The universe operates on perfect administrative order. When your life ends, that official ledger is called up for a mandatory spiritual audit. That audit takes place deep underground in DU. a subterranean penal system that functions as the universe's ultimate correctional facility. Here, your ledger is reviewed by the 10 Yama kings. These supreme magistrates preside over 10 specific courts to judge your soul's balance sheet. The initial audit forces you to face the mirror of retribution. You witness your earthly sins exactly as your victims experienced them. Crimes like tax evasion or murder are routed downward into highly specific punishment chambers, pounding stone mallets, freezing ice, or boiling oil. You endure these gruesome tortures until your specific volume of karmic debt is completely burned away. DU acts as a temporary crucible, designed strictly for the purification and balancing of the soul. When your karmic debt finally reaches zero, your ledger is cleared. You are then escorted to the Pavilion of Forgetfulness. Here, Lady Mangpo administers a mandatory magical tea to departing souls. The brew completely wipes your memory, providing a blank slate for the life ahead. Cleansed and empty, you are fed into the massive wheel of reincarnation, known as samsara, to be reborn into the world based on your newly balanced cosmic status. Mortal life, celestial oversight, karmic punishment, and rebirth. It forms a closed, perfectly sealed, and inescapable machine. If the universe is a flawlessly sealed administrative loop, is it possible for a mortal to simply opt out? Yes. A beloved group of outcasts, known as the 8 Immortals, successfully hacked the celestial bureaucracy. They come from incredibly relatable human backgrounds. The group includes a scholar named Lu Dongbin, an iron-crutched beggar named Li Tieguai, and a female healer named He Xianggu. They were not handed divine status by the Jade Emperor. They achieved it independently through Taoist cultivation, internal alchemy, and personal piety. By mastering their qi, their internal vital energy, they learned how to transcend physical death. This allowed them to bypass the jurisdiction of DU entirely. Instead of taking official posts in the rigid hierarchy of the heavenly court, the immortals chose a free, wandering existence. They represent a form of anarchic hope. Through their example, enlightenment and eternal freedom become acts of radical self-mastery, accessible to anyone willing to find the way.
When the universe was first carved out of primordial chaos, the creation of the Earth was only a temporary victory. Without a constant active force to hold the layers apart, reality threatened to collapse back into the void. 4 mythological guardians, the azure dragon, vermilion bird, white tiger, and black tortoise, lock down the cardinal directions as elemental pillars. The center is anchored by Earth, represented by the yellow dragon and Keelan. Their presence stabilizes the rotation, symbolizing righteous rule. Pushing against this order are the 4 fiends, Hundun, representing chaos, Taotie, representing gluttony, Taowu, representing ignorance, and Changqi, representing deviousness. In this cosmology, the universe functions like a high-tension machine balanced on a narrow edge. If human morality fails, the structural integrity of these directions weakens, allowing the chaotic fiends to surge back and devour the world. This cosmic pressure reached a breaking point during the final years of the Shang dynasty. As the human realm fell into corruption, the stability of the entire universe began to erode. King Zhou's reign became a catalyst for this decay, accelerated by his concubine Daji, a 9-tailed fox spirit who acted as a vessel for temptation and chaos. Order was only restored through a massive, apocalyptic war. Led by the sage Jiangxia, heavenly forces clashed with the corrupted Shang armies in a struggle that utilized divine weapons and elemental magic to settle the fate of the throne. As the mortal heroes and spirits fell on the battlefield, they were drafted directly into a celestial hierarchy. Under the mandate of the Fenshenbang, or the investiture of the gods, these fallen souls, both the loyalists and their enemies, were assigned specific titles and duties in the heavens. By organizing these spirits into specialized departments, governing everything from the weather to disease, the heavens established the administrative infrastructure needed to regulate the volatile natural forces that once threatened the world. But the order of the heavens faced a second challenge, a threat rising from within the celestial court itself, driven by the ego of a single being. Sun Wukong, the Monkey King,
used his mastery of 72 transformations and his stolen immortality to wage a one-monkey war against the celestial bureaucracy. His rebellion only ended when the Buddha intervened, pinning Wukong beneath the Five Elements Mountain, where he remained trapped for 5 centuries. In many traditions, Wukong represents the monkey mind, the human tendency toward unrestrained impulse and ego. His imprisonment beneath the mountain serves as a literal cage for his lack of discipline. His path to redemption required him to protect the monk Tong Sanzong on a journey to retrieve sacred Buddhist texts from India, a pilgrimage that would eventually leave a lasting legacy in the physical architecture of China. He was joined by 2 other outcasts, Zhu Baji, a pig demon representing base desire, and Sha Wu Jing, a fallen general representing blind obedience. By subduing demons that mirror their own greed and pride, the 3 disciples transform from chaotic rebels into disciplined guardians. Their internal enlightenment becomes a necessary component of the cosmic order they once tried to dismantle. The same heavenly bureaucracy that oversees cosmic warfare also dictates the emotional rhythm of human time. This is visible in the legend of Chang'e, who drank the elixir of immortality and ascended alone to the moon, forever separated from her husband.
Her isolation anchors the human calendar, providing the mythological foundation for the Mid-Autumn Festival, a time when families gather specifically to celebrate their own togetherness. The heavens also enforce the story of the cowherd and the weaver girl, 2 lovers punished for neglecting their duties and banished to opposite sides of the stars. Their separation is physically mapped in the night sky. The celestial Silver River, what we know as the Milky Way, acts as the insurmountable barrier keeping the 2 lovers apart. Their one night of reunion each year is celebrated today as the Chixie Festival, where the bridge of magpies that links them briefly overcomes the strict laws of the celestial court. From the elemental anchors at the edges of the world to the constellations overhead, this mythology functions as a map of balance. It remains a functional system, observed through the festivals and traditions of billions of people today.
The Greek universe does not begin with a sudden burst of light. According to their earliest myths, it begins with chaos, a yawning, bottomless void of mist and heavy darkness. From this emptiness emerged the first physical entities, Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky. Together, they produce a terrifying lineage. First, the 12 Titans, then the one-eyed Cyclopes, and finally, the Hecatoncres, monsters with 50 heads and 100 hands. Uranus looks at his monstrous children with immediate dread. Driven by paranoia, he refuses to let them see the light of day, forcing them back deep within Gaia's womb. To keep them trapped, he presses his entire massive body against the earth, creating a crushing weight that eliminates any physical space between the ground and the heavens. The original state of the Greek cosmos is suffocatingly stagnant. With the sky physically smothering the earth, nothing can grow, move, or breathe. Creating the space required for life to exist will require a violent rupture. Gaia suffers immense physical agony from the trapped children stretching her crust. Desperate, she crafts a massive, jagged sickle made of adamant and begs her offspring for help. Only her youngest Titan son, Cronus, steps forward to take the weapon. When Uranus descends to sleep with Gaia, Cronus strikes from the shadows. He ambushes his father with the sickle, castrating him in a single swing. This act of violence physically severs the sky from the earth, lifting the heavens upward. The cosmic fallout is immediate. Drops of Uranus's blood fall, spawning Furies, giants, and nymphs. His severed remains fall into the sea, churning into foam that births Aphrodite. Patricide pries the universe open. The smothering stagnation of Uranus is gone, replaced by the open skies and the newly established ruthless regime of Cronus and the Titans. Under Cronus and his sister wife Rhea, the Titans oversee what poets later call a golden age. But Cronus's reign is haunted by an ancient prophecy delivered by his deposed parents. One of his own children will eventually overthrow him. To cheat this destiny, Cronus devises a horrific solution. As Rhea gives birth to the first generation of Olympians,
Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, Cronus takes them one by one and swallows each infant whole. By doing this, Cronus commits the exact sin he punished his father for. He traps his own children inside a dark, inescapable prison. Only this time, he substitutes his own stomach for the caverns of the earth. Absolute desperation to maintain power turns the revolutionary liberator into the exact tyrant he originally destroyed. Watching her children vanish breaks Rhea. To save her sixth child, she replicates Gaia's rebellion. Fleeing to Crete, she hides her newborn son, Zeus, in a cave. She then gives the paranoid Cronus a swaddled stone, which he swallows without a second thought. Safe from his father's stomach, Zeus grows to manhood in secret, nurtured by mountain nymphs and a divine goat. While Cronus watches his own throne, his son stays hidden in the shadows, honing a power that his father does not even know exists. By violently suppressing his offspring to avoid his fate, Cronus ensured the son who escaped would have every reason to destroy him. Fully grown, Zeus infiltrates the Titan stronghold of Mount Othrys. Disguised as a cupbearer, he slips an emetic portion into Cronus's drink. The poison forces the Titan king to violently vomit up the stone, followed by Zeus's 5 fully grown divine siblings. The lines are drawn. On one side are the old gods, the Titans, entrenched on Mount Othrys. On the other are the new gods, the Olympians, claiming Mount Olympus. This erupts into the Titanomachy, an apocalyptic 10-year war for sovereignty over the world. The war drags into a brutal stalemate. Zeus realizes that to win, he must do what his predecessors found unthinkable: descend into the black pits of Tartarus to liberate the monstrous outcasts, the Cyclopes and Hecatonchires. Claiming ultimate power in the cosmos paradoxically required allying with the chaotic, untamed forces that previous generations had desperately tried to bury. Out of deep gratitude for their freedom, the master smith Cyclopes forge the sovereign tools of the new divine order. They present Poseidon with his trident, Hades with his helm of invisibility, and Zeus with his sky-shattering thunderbolts. Armed with their new arsenal, the Olympians unleash a devastating final strike. Zeus rains lightning from above, while the 50-headed Hecatonchires rip up the earth, hurling mountains of boulders to bury the Titans in a relentless avalanche. The Titans are completely defeated. The former rulers of the universe are cast down and bound in the eternal darkness of Tartarus, permanently guarded by the 100-handed monsters they once oppressed. The Olympian victory is a final purge of the primordial chaos. It clears away the towering elemental gods of old, allowing a stabilized era of existence to begin. Zeus takes the throne of Mount Olympus, but he makes a crucial departure from the history of his family. Instead of hoarding all authority, he divides the cosmos with his brothers, delegating dominion over the sea to Poseidon and the underworld to Hades. This strategic division of power delegates the burden of rule. It prevents the tyrannical paranoia of absolute control that doomed both Uranus and Cronus to violent uprisings. The Greeks designed this myth to explain how their universe survived its own origins. It details a necessary evolution, a transition from brutal generational chaos into an ordered world built to endure for millennia.
The victory left the siblings in possession of a universe that had been reduced to a blank slate. They realized that without a structured system of governance, the physical world would inevitably collapse back into the chaos they had just defeated. A new danger emerged, a power vacuum. There were now 6 equally powerful, immortal siblings with no established hierarchy, and the potential for a second civil war over who would rule the ruins of the cosmos was immediate. They looked for neutral ground to negotiate a partition. They settled on Mount Olympus, using its towering peaks as a shared command center and a vantage point from which to survey their conquered territory. Their solution was to invent a system of specialized, mutually exclusive jurisdictions, ensuring that no single god could ever again claim total, undivided power over existence. This text from our source describes the mechanical divide. To prevent further conflict, the 3 brothers, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, shook lots in a helmet to distribute the 3 layers of the physical cosmos. Zeus drew the lot for the sky.
By claiming the highest layer of reality and commanding the weather, he established himself as the supreme king of the gods, enforcing his law through the constant threat of his thunderbolts. Poseidon claimed the oceans, becoming the Earthshaker. He moved his throne to the deep, taking control of the perilous waters, storms, and earthquakes that surrounded the Greek world. Hades drew the darkest lot, the underworld. He was granted the charcoal-shadowed realm of the dead, far beneath the earth, a domain so isolated that he remained largely separated from the affairs of Mount Olympus. This partition effectively organized the physical universe into 3 vertical layers. Zeus held the heavens, Poseidon ruled the surface waters, and Hades governed the depths below. While the brothers managed the physical geography of the world, the 3 sisters, Demeter, Hera, and Hestia, assumed control over the sociological pillars of existence on Earth. In this section of our source, Demeter is identified as the goddess of the cornfield. Because she held absolute control over agriculture and the harvest, she alone possessed the power to dictate humanity's survival through feast or famine. Hera was named Queen of the Gods. She became the fierce guardian of marriage and the family unit, protecting the social order of the home against the chaos caused by the gods' frequent infidelities. Hestia took domain over the hearth. As the goddess of the sacred fire, she was the quiet, constant center of domestic life and the focus of Greek religious sacrifice. By dividing these roles, the sisters built the societal structures, the food supply, the legal family, and the domestic center that allowed human civilization to thrive within the brothers' physical world. This new universe was fundamentally different from the one ruled by the Titans. Vast, unthinking voids were replaced by specialized, human-like beings holding distinct portfolios of power. This structure created a cosmic system of checks and balances. No single god held absolute authority. Their interlocking interests functioned as a unified machine. For the ancient Greeks, this framework mapped the terrifying forces of nature and society onto a logical, governed system. Through this partitioning of the universe, the elder Olympians transitioned the cosmos from a chaotic, elemental accident into a meticulously governed civilization.
Zeus secured his throne through absolute, earth-shattering violence. He hurled thunderbolts, shattered the old regime of the Titans, and claimed Mount Olympus. That kind of blunt, physical trauma works perfectly when you are conquering the cosmos. But look at this structure. Zeus sits at the top, but beneath him is a massive, incredibly complex web of human activity. People are building cities, establishing trade routes, fighting wars, and planting crops. You cannot govern crop rotations and commerce with a thunderbolt. Zeus realized he had to delegate. He created a new cosmic order by filling those gaps with a specialized management class, his children. Yet the beings tasked with imposing civilization and order on humanity were born out of supreme dysfunction. They are the products of infidelity, bizarre biology, and intense grudges. To truly grasp ancient Greek culture, we have to look at how this highly unstable, scandalous family divided and conquered the human experience. Take warfare. Athena sprang fully armed directly from the head of Zeus. She embodies the cold, calculated intellect of conflict. She is strategy, defense, and reason, qualities so revered by the ancient Athenians that they built the Parthenon in her honor. Contrast her with her half-brother, Ares. He is the sweat, the panic, and the slaughter of the battlefield. He is the untamed, insatiable aspect of combat that ruins lives, and the Greeks generally loathed him. Later, the Romans would heavily rebrand him as Mars. They promoted him from an unhinged liability to a central founding god, associating his violence with the defense of the state and making him a patron of farmers, tied to the spring planting season. But back in Greece, the active worship of Ares' brand of sheer physical valor was strictly limited. It really only found a home in the brutal military culture of Sparta. In the myths written by everyone else, Ares faces constant humiliation. He was literally forced to stand trial for war crimes on this specific rocky outcrop in Athens, the Areopagus Hill. By splitting conflict into 2 distinct gods, the Greeks elevated human intellect over animalistic violence. The physical world required its own division of labor. When the Titan Leto became pregnant by Zeus, his furious wife Hera banned her from giving birth on solid land. Leto had to find refuge on a floating chunk of rock, the island of Delos,
where she gave birth to a powerful set of twins. The first twin, Artemis, became the fiercely independent virgin Vitus of the untamed wilderness. She managed the hunt, wild animals, and acted as the divine protector of human childbirth. Her twin brother, Apollo, took on the pinnacle of civilization. From this temple at Delphi, he governed prophecy. He was the golden boy of the pantheon, managing music and poetry, mastering early medicine, and the sun's very light. But while Apollo operated in the light, another god worked in the dirt. Hephaestus was born lame, and his own mother Hera tossed him off Mount Olympus in sheer disgust. Hephaestus survived by becoming indispensable. He set up his workshop inside active volcanoes like Mount Etna, serving as the master blacksmith and forging miracles of metal, including the brass and gold palaces the other gods lived in. Then there is Hermes. Born in a cave, he didn't even wait a day before sneaking out into the night to steal a herd of cattle belonging to his older brother, Apollo. That supreme cunning made him the perfect emissary. Hermes moved freely across borders, managing travel, commerce, diplomacy, and the literal transition of souls into the afterlife. This celestial bureaucracy only functioned because it included everyone. It relied on the rejected outcasts to build the physical infrastructure and the sly tricksters to navigate the boundaries everyone else was bound by. But Zeus's structure faced a massive problem. You cannot schedule biology. Aphrodite breaks the timeline of the pantheon entirely. She emerged from the sea foam generated by the severed remains of the old sky god Uranus. She is older than Zeus, yet she wields absolute dominion over love, beauty, and procreation. She was forced into an arranged marriage with the deformed blacksmith Hephaestus. Unsurprisingly, she sought out an escape, starting a wildly reckless, heavily documented affair with the war god Ares. Hephaestus realized what was happening and went to his forge. He engineered an unbreakable, invisible chain. When Ares and Aphrodite next met in bed, the net dropped, trapping the lovers in place so the rest of the pantheon could gather around and laugh at them. Add to this volatile mix Dionysus, the only Olympian born to a mortal woman. He introduced the chaos, ecstasy, and total madness of wine to the divine council. These constant scandals proved a vital point. Even the highest authorities in the universe fail to perfectly manage passion, desire, and intoxication. By the time the roster is full, Mount Olympus operates as a highly specialized corporate structure, managing every conceivable facet of cosmic and earthly existence. Yet the managers running this machine constantly lie to each other, commit adultery, steal, and hold bitter grudges for centuries. The ancient Greeks did not invent these gods to be perfect moral arbiters. They created them to explain an incredibly confusing world by projecting their own human instincts onto the heavens. The younger Olympians are exactly as brilliant, petty, and unpredictable as the civilization that worshipped them. They serve as a massive, permanent mirror reflecting the beautiful mess of the human condition right back at us.
Imagine the earliest days of humanity. No cities, no tools, no warmth. Just a fragile species shivering in the dark, completely at the mercy of a chaotic and freezing natural world. High above that suffering sat Olympus. The gods maintained an absolute separation from the mortals below, preferring humans in a state of weakness. A helpless humanity meant an unquestioned divine hierarchy. But Prometheus saw things differently. He was a titan, a being of immense power who had fought alongside the Olympians. Yet, looking down at those freezing early humans, he felt a profound sympathy. He decided to level the playing field. This ancient text details how he accomplished it. Prometheus snuck into the divine realm, broke off a fragment of glowing charcoal from the chariot of the sun, and thrust it into a giant fennel stalk. He then smuggled that single spark down to Earth. Handing fire to mortals was a severe technological transgression. It provided warmth, laid the foundation for metallurgy, enabled advanced architecture, and fostered true independence. By giving humanity the means to build their own civilization, Prometheus effectively armed mortals against the gods, turning a fragile species into a long-term threat. Zeus retaliated with brutal efficiency. He chained Prometheus to a jagged peak in the freezing Caucasus Mountains, where a vulture would tear out his liver every single day, only for it to regrow so the cycle of torture could repeat.
Zeus then moved to neutralize the advantage humanity had acquired. As this passage describes, he ordered Hephaestus to forge a new being out of clay. Her name was Pandora, engineered as a beautiful distraction to introduce complexity, conflict, and ruin into the previously simple mortal world. When Pandora opened the jar she had been warned to keep shut, a physical cloud of plagues poured out. The text specifically lists spites like old age, sickness, labor, and insanity. Only delusive hope was caught under the lid before it could escape. In Hesiod's telling, these two myths function as a calculated pairing. Zeus uses Pandora as a specific tactic to counter Prometheus's gift, a demonstration that in this mythology, any significant mortal gain is met with a new, equally potent struggle. Mortals possessed the heat to forge iron and cook meat, but they also inherited the capacity for endless physical and psychological suffering. The baseline of the human condition had been set. We are capable, but we are cursed. Generations later, humanity's capability had grown into intense violence. Zeus looked down at this warring bronze race and decided the experiment had failed. He unleashed a cataclysmic flood, intending to drown the earth and wipe the mortal slate entirely clean. This text on the Greek flood myth records the survival of just two individuals, Deucalion and Pyrrha. Finding themselves alone in a ruined world, they begged the gods for a way to bring their species back from extinction. The gods instructed them to throw the bones of their mother over their shoulders. Realizing this meant Mother Earth, they gathered stones and cast them behind their backs. When the rocks hit the muddy ground, they morphed into flesh and bone, sprouting into a new generation. This change in material, from soft clay to unyielding stone, redefined the human identity. They were no longer just the fragile products of a divine artisan. They were a generation born from the hard, unforgiving bones of the earth itself. Recognizing that floods would not keep mortals down, the Olympians changed their strategy. As the heroic age began, the gods stopped trying to destroy humanity completely. Instead, they began picking favorites, sponsoring specific heroes, and using mortals as proxies in their own rivalries. Take Perseus, depicted here in this famous bronze statue. He is widely remembered as the ultimate monster slayer for beheading the Gorgon Medusa. But Perseus achieved this through intense divine intervention. Look at the goddess Athena, seen here in marble. She provided the highly polished shield Perseus used as a mirror to avoid Medusa's petrifying gaze. He also relied on Hades' helm and Hermes' sandals. A normal human lacking these would fail instantly. Compare Perseus to those shivering figures huddled in the freezing dark from the First Age. Humanity had figured out how to leverage the gods' attention. Divine interference had evolved from a curse to be feared into a highly specific advantage to be wielded. Survival now required navigating the complex web of Olympian patronage. The humans who reached the peak of achievement succeeded by securing divine favor and surviving the intense scrutiny that came with it. But there was a hard ceiling on that success, governed by the concept of hubris. Hubris occurred when mortals forgot their place and acted with the arrogance of gods. To the Olympians, extreme mortal ambition was a structural threat that had to be neutralized. The tragedy of Icarus perfectly illustrates this limit. With miraculous wax and feather wings, he escaped the labyrinth and conquered the sky. But the thrill of flight consumed him. He mistook a borrowed tool for true divine invincibility and flew directly toward the sun. The heat melted the wax, and the sea claimed his life. The mechanics of the punishment were natural, but the message was divine. The gods will grant you tools, and they will grant you patronage, but the second you stop showing absolute reverence, the fall is permanent. Thousands of years later, these stories still resonate. The ancient Greeks populated their tales with monsters and magic, but they also took the chaotic, unpredictable forces of nature and the volatile extremes of human emotion and gave them names and faces. These stories endure because they capture the persistent tension of the human experience, the drive to rise and innovate, constantly colliding with the limits of our own nature. They suggest that to be human is to exist within that struggle, equipped with the fire of the gods, yet always standing in the shadow of their mountain.
Long before recorded history, the Earth was not ours. It was an untamed wilderness, occupied by primordial monsters and overseen by distant, unreachable gods. This timeline maps out what the poet Hesiod called the 5 ages of man. And right before our current era, there is a blazing anomaly, a brief, violently bright flash wedged tightly between the Bronze and Iron Ages. The Greeks called it the Age of Heroes. This era had a highly specific function. The gods needed to clear the earth of its primordial chaos, so they bred a generation of intermediaries. By mixing divine blood with mortal humans, they engineered demigods, living weapons deployed to exterminate those early threats. But that exact mixture is what made them so dangerous. You have beings wielding world-breaking cosmic power, operating on the volatile, fragile software of human emotion. The surviving myths record a trajectory far darker than any simple fable. This era functioned as a brutal, tragic mass extinction, the violent clearing of the earth until humanity was the only thing left standing. The first phase of this era was defined by raw, blunt force. The vanguard of the heroic age consisted of figures whose explicit, bloody purpose was physical extermination. Take Heracles. We often hear about his impossible 12 labors as glorious conquests. In reality, they were a forced penance. Hera, the queen of the gods, struck him with a madness that caused him to murder his own family. The labors were his punishment. His weapons represent the crushing, physical burdens of a man forced to brutally beat nature into submission. Other heroes executed similar purges. Theseus descended into the blinding dark of a Cretan labyrinth to slaughter the Minotaur. These missions systematically stripped the world of its hybrid nightmares. Yet as the external monsters died off, the internal ones took over. These supposed saviors were consistently derailed by arrogance, vicious betrayals, and fits of uncontrollable rage. Defeating the beasts was only step one. The gods quickly realized that the unchecked divine power walking around inside the heroes themselves was rapidly becoming the primary threat to the earth. With the physical wilderness mostly tamed, the nature of the conflict escalated. The next threat couldn't be punched or stabbed. It was entirely psychological. The epicenter of this new warfare was the Oracle of Delphi. Here, the gods dispensed prophecies that acted as inescapable psychological cages. No one illustrates this better than King Oedipus. He successfully outsmarted the monstrous Sphinx using pure human intellect. But that same mind was utterly crushed by the weight of a divine prophecy, predicting he would kill his father and marry his mother. The Greeks called this very mechanism hamartia, the fatal flaw. The specific gifts the gods gave these heroes, whether it was relentless intellect or unyielding pride, were the exact tripwires designed to trigger their downfall. Hamartia laid bare the failure of the demigod experiment. Every time the gods intervened to equip their children for success, they actively guaranteed their psychological destruction. This boiling tension inevitably reached a breaking point. It sparked a conflict that functioned as a mass extinction event of the demigods, the Trojan War. Over 10 agonizing years, this siege sucked in almost every remaining divine bloodline across the Mediterranean. It threw the greatest living heroes into a meat grinder of mutual destruction. It was here that the old guard clashed with the new. You had warriors like Achilles, who actively chose Kleos, seeking eternal glory on the battlefield, even if it meant a violently short life. But Odysseus introduced a different strategy. He operated on mitis, cunning intellect, prioritizing raw survival and strategy over bleeding to death for a song. Odysseus's punishing 10-year journey home from Troy was a desperate final struggle to simply outlive a magical world that was rapidly expiring. By the time the dust settled, the blood-soaked beaches of Troy and the monstrous seas of the Odyssey served as the final burial ground for the Age of Heroes. In the aftermath, a profound silence fell over the world. The physical monsters were extinct. The tragic kings were ruined, and the great warriors were dead. Having watched their demigod experiment burn itself to the ground, the gods retreated to Mount Olympus. They permanently withdrew from mortal affairs, effectively burning the bridge behind them.
This absolute withdrawal closed the book on the heroic age and ushered in what Hesiod called the Iron Age, an era defined by mundane labor, devoid of magic, and distinctly human.
The gods are gone, the magic has bled out, and the demigods are buried. All that remains is the work of ordinary hands and the cold weight of iron, the realization that from here on out, human effort is the only force left to shape the world.
Imagine a primordial god who swallows his own children whole, or a shadowy beast emerging from the fog to devour a city. To the modern, rational mind, these mythological narratives read like surreal, impossible fever dreams. Yet the people who told these stories were not living in a fantasy world. They were highly organized, advanced civilizations that dedicated staggering amounts of labor, engineering, and wealth to carve these exact narratives into permanent stone. They built their entire legal and social structures around them. Instead of viewing ancient storytellers as ignorant, scholars began looking at myths as complex, multi-layered archives. We have simply lost the specific literacy required to read them. For centuries, researchers have attempted to decipher these layers. Over time, the academic world shifted into two distinct camps of interpretation, each with a different method for analyzing the stories. This tension centers on a specific choice, whether we view a myth as a distorted record of physical history or a symbolic map of the human mind. We start with the outward view. Scholars in the literalist camp argue every myth is rooted in a tangible physical event from the ancient world. This approach dates back to the 4th century BC with Euhemerism. A Greek thinker named Euhemerus suggested that the gods were originally just mortal human kings, whose real deeds were exaggerated into divine powers through centuries of retelling. In the 19th century, archaeologists found physical evidence to support this. They excavated the real, historical Bronze Age cities that inspired the Trojan War, uncovering artifacts like the golden mask of Agamemnon and demonstrating that flesh and blood humans inspired the epics. Then there is the etiological theory. Before the scientific method, people still needed to understand their environment. This theory suggests myths functioned as primitive science, associative stories invented to explain natural phenomena, like thunderstorms or the changing of the seasons. Other scholars view myth as a sociological charter. In this reading, rulers drafted binding legal guidelines and projected them into a sacred, unshakable past to justify the social hierarchy and ensure obedience in the present. For the literalists, myths were necessary mechanisms. They were practical tools used to preserve history, to explain nature, and enforce civic order. Eventually, the dividing line between physical history and abstract belief begins to blur. This transition is anchored by the myth and ritual school, developed by scholars like J.G. Fraser. They proposed that myths were actually scripts, written specifically to accompany and explain physical, magical, agricultural rituals. This sparked a debate in academia. Did the myth serve as a direct set of instructions to enact a harvest ritual? Or was the myth invented long after the fact to explain a physical ritual they had forgotten the original meaning of? The myth and ritual school suggests that physical survival tactics eventually evolved into the abstract, symbolic beliefs that dominate modern thought. The symbolic camp abandoned the physical world entirely. These scholars argue that myths are about the internal landscape of the human mind, rather than external history. Early on, this took the form of the allegorical approach. Philosophers maintained that the scandalous behaviors of the gods were actually deep philosophical allegories in disguise. By the 20th century, Claude Lévi-Strauss introduced structuralism. He theorized that human societies possess unresolvable contradictions, like the friction between nature and culture, and that these paradoxes are encoded into myths to be processed. This illustrates the concept. Structuralism dictates a myth mediates unresolvable paradoxes by hiding strict binary opposites inside the narrative. A story contrasts raw and cooked elements, balancing the scale of societal tension without the audience realizing it. From there, psychoanalytic theory took a deeper inward journey. Sigmund Freud viewed myth as an expression of repressed trauma and deep inherited guilt manifesting in the human psyche. Carl Jung expanded this concept into the collective unconscious. He argued that myths are constructed from universal psychological archetypes,
patterns and symbols shared inherently by all humans across the globe. Finally, Joseph Campbell synthesized these ideas into the hero's journey. He identified that myth operates as a metaphorical guide through the universal rites of passage we all experience in human life. To a symbolist, these stories function as psychological survival guides for navigating human existence. A more recent synthesis reveals that these literal and symbolic theories often operate in tandem. Take the myth of the Minotaur and the Labyrinth. We can apply all of these academic lenses to this single story simultaneously. This diagram shows how the story functions laterally. On one layer, the myth is a distorted historical memory of a real Bronze Age conflict. On a second layer, it acts as a social charter outlining civic duty. And on a third layer, it operates as a Jungian archetype, representing the human confrontation with the dark unconscious. This reveals a culture of highly efficient communication, where a single story could transmit vast amounts of data across generations. Myths are multifaceted mirrors of humanity. They wrap the blueprints of our history, our laws, and our deepest psychology into one enduring narrative.
Ancient Vedic literature describes the universe as more than a collection of fables. It is a meticulously structured map of consciousness and existence. This cosmic architecture begins at a single origin point, the Hiranyangagarbha, the cosmic golden egg. Vedic mythology describes this egg fracturing to reveal Lord Brahma, the creator, emerging while seated upon a lotus. Brahma's first act is to establish the dichotomy of good and evil, populating the void with devas, demons, and the first earthly creatures. This creation establishes 14 vertical dimensions of existence, the lokas, and the specific divine mechanics that dictate how a soul moves between them. This spatial expansion forms a scaffolding for the soul, providing a tiered environment for every possible state of awareness. The emergence of Brahma creates a fixed structural framework where all elements of the cosmos are assigned a specific function and placement. The macro structure of this universe consists of a massive vertical axis containing 14 distinct dimensions, or lokas. Bhuloka, or Earth, sits at the center of this axis as the pivotal middle realm. Earth is the only realm in the entire system where karma can be actively generated or altered. It is the unique dimension where human action dictates the soul's future trajectory. Ascending from Earth are the 7 upper worlds, the Vyartis, representing sequential stages of spiritual enlightenment. In Bhuvarloka and Svarlopa, souls experience the rewards of virtuous karma, existing in realms often described as celestial heavens. Further up are the Mahar, Jhana, and Tapalokas, domains reserved for enlightened rishis and sages who have achieved extraordinary spiritual power. At the absolute zenith sits Satyaloka, the abode of truth and the highest possible state of awareness. This is where souls achieve moksha, obtaining final liberation from the cycle of birth and death. Climbing these upper realms requires the shedding of material delusion as the soul moves towards subtler levels of existence. The upper lokas represent a trajectory towards absolute unity, where the mystic fog of material energy finally clears to reveal ultimate reality. Panning downward from Earth reveals the 7 lower worlds, the Patalas, dimensions characterized by spiritual regression. These are not fiery torture chambers. They are sunless netherworlds defined by dark, opulent materialism and a lack of spiritual insight. The descent begins in Atala, where the ego drives insatiable desires, and residents are consumed by sensory indulgence. Continued descent through realms like Mahatala reveals a subterranean existence where fear and anxiety prevail because emotions are left entirely uncontrolled. The Puranas describe these realms as the home of the Nagas, serpent beings that represent the fusion of human intellect with primal base instincts. The axis ends at Patala, the lowest level of awareness, ruled by the serpent king Vasuki and defined by disdain and wrath. Even here, the jewels on the hoods of the serpents illuminate the darkness, symbolizing that the possibility of knowledge remains. A soul's presence in the Patalas is the environmental reflection of its own internal state, where base instincts and material energy dictate the nature of its surroundings.
Managing the 14 lokas requires a triad of cosmic administrators known as the Trimurti. Each deity manages a phase of the cosmic cycle. Brahma creates the universe, Vishnu preserves its balance, and Shiva recycles it through destruction. While Brahma is the architect of the entire system, he is rarely the focus of modern worship. Hindu philosophy views Brahma's creative work as a completed event of the past, representing energy that has already been exhausted. Evidence of this is found in the physical world. There is only one major internationally recognized temple dedicated to Brahma, located in Pushkar, Rajasthan. Conversely, Vishnu and Shiva represent active forces that manage the ongoing preservation and destruction required for daily existence. Devotees seek the discipline of Vishnu to sustain their lives, and the detachment of Shiva to destroy internal evils. Hindu worship centers on the dynamic forces currently sustaining and recycling reality, as these energies are required to navigate the present life cycle. Within Hindu ontology, the male gods of the Trimurti form the structural framework, but they remain inert without a divine feminine counterpart. This energetic component is Shakti, the primordial kinetic power required to actualize any cosmic function. Goddess Saraswati provides the resonance of wisdom and knowledge, which serves as the specific energetic fuel for Brahma's active creation. Goddess Lakshmi embodies prosperity and grace, providing the kinetic power Vishnu needs to maintain and preserve the universe. Goddess Parvati, in her powerful forms like Durga, provides the transformative force required for Shiva to execute the cycle of destruction. These three goddesses form the Tridevi, representing the feminine energy inseparable from the masculine roles of the Trimurti. The Tridevi function as the engines of the cosmos, providing the fundamental power that transforms abstract potential into a vibrating reality. This ontological map provides the spatial reality of the 14 lokas, driven by the temporal engines of the Trimurti and Tridevi. This combined architecture functions as a self-regulating machine that maintains the balance between karma, time, and consciousness. Because this system is cyclical, the force of destruction will eventually return all 14 realms to the initial void. Until that dissolution, the entire cosmic architecture depends upon the stability of the middle realm, Earth. What mechanism activates when the karmic pivot of Earth shifts so far toward corruption that it threatens the structural integrity of all 14 lokas? If the system cannot self-regulate, the divine must breach the dimensional barrier of the locus and physically enter Bhuloka to restore the balance.
Hindu cosmology operates on a staggering scale. While many ancient cultures measured history in thousands of years, Hindu texts describe time in cycles lasting billions and trillions of years. Within this endless loop of creation and destruction sits Bhagwan Vishnu, the preserver. His role is to maintain the delicate cosmic balance between dharma, righteousness and natural order, and adharma, the forces of chaos and decay. Because time is cyclical, chaos always eventually rises. When it threatens to collapse the universe entirely, the preserver is forced to physically enter the mortal world to restore order. In the Bhagavad Gita, the divine promises to descend into the material realm whenever righteousness falters. Over the course of history, this happens through the Dashavatara, the 10 principal incarnations of Vishnu. There is a striking parallel between these 10 ancient myths and the framework of modern evolutionary biology. This diagram plots cosmic ages on the top against biological eras on the bottom. The sequence of incarnations aligns with the chronological development of life. Mapped together, it suggests ancient rishis possessed an allegorical understanding of evolution long before the biological record was formalized. Modern science tells us that life began in the vast primordial oceans. The Dashavatara starts in the same environment. The first avatar is Matsya, a giant fish. During a cataclysmic global flood, Matsya guides an ark carrying the seeds of all life along with the sacred knowledge of the Vedas, ensuring they survive the deluge. Over millions of years, biological organisms faced the hurdle of transitioning from the water to the land.
The second incarnation, Korma the tortoise, represents this amphibian milestone, a being that bridges the gap between aquatic and terrestrial life. These first two descents mirror a purely biological struggle, where survival depends entirely on physical adaptation to a changing environment. As life moves fully onto land, the boar avatar, Varaha, symbolizes terrestrial mastery. He is depicted diving into the cosmic ocean to hoist the earth goddess to the surface, securing a place for life to build. This biological foundation eventually crosses a new threshold, the boundary between animal instinct and the emergence of self-awareness. To defeat a tyrant with a seemingly invincible boon, Vishnu becomes Narasimha, half man, half lion. He uses logic to bypass the demon's protection, attacking at the one moment and in the one place where the tyrant is vulnerable. In this form, we see the transition from animal force to human intelligence, where survival begins to rely on judgment rather than just strength. Evolution then shifts into the development of the human mind. Vamana, a dwarf, proves that intellect has become superior to physical brawn by reclaiming the universe through wit and 3 cosmic steps. Then comes Parashurama, an axe-wielding warrior sage. He reflects the rise of tool-using humans and the turbulent transition into tribal societies. Humanity eventually develops organized civilizations, governed by laws and ethics. This era is defined by the 7th avatar, Rama, the ideal prince who rules through righteousness. By the 8th avatar, Krishna, society has reached a level of high sophistication. Krishna acts as a divine statesman, navigating extreme moral complexity and political intrigue to guide humanity through the Kurukshetra war. These 4 human incarnations track the progression of our species from primitive tool users to the architects of high civilization. But physical conquest and societal growth eventually give way to a different kind of progress. The 9th incarnation, Buddha, represents a shift toward introspection. He departs from external rituals and warfare, teaching a path of nonviolence and mindfulness. This incarnation signals a stage where the focus of development shifts from physical dominance to internal clarity and spiritual realization. This brings us to the present, the Kali Yuga. Hindu texts describe this current era as a time of spiritual decay and technological excess. According to this cycle, the imbalance eventually becomes so severe that it requires a systemic reset rather than a simple correction. Prophecy tells of Kalki, the final avatar who arrives on a white horse to end the age of chaos. He is a warrior tasked with cleansing the world to allow for a new era of purity. From an evolutionary perspective, this final reset acts as a biological necessity. When an environment can no longer sustain its current form, it undergoes a radical collapse to make room for the next stage of life.
These scales represent the governing force of the universe, dharma, or cosmic order. When human greed and corruption tip the balance toward adharma, the resulting chaos threatens the very foundation of existence. To prevent total moral collapse, Vishnu, the preserver, intervenes. He leaves the celestial realm to descend to earth in physical form, acting as a divine weight to pull reality back into alignment. These descents are known as Adashavatar. Across various eras of time, Vishnu appears in 10 distinct divine incarnations, each manifesting specifically to address the unique crisis of that age. 2 of these incarnations triggered massive, world-redefining cosmic wars. These conflicts were documented in India's most significant epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. These ancient texts serve as exhaustive survival guides for the human conscience, offering a framework for maintaining integrity during periods of total societal collapse. The Ramayana presents a world where the lines of duty are absolute. It follows Lord Rama, Vishnu's 7th avatar, who embodies the ideal man. To honor his father's word, Rama willingly accepts a 14-year exile into the forest, placing his kingly duty above his personal comfort. The peace of his exile is shattered when the 10-headed demon king Ravana abducts Rama's wife, Sita. This act of violence serves as the catalyst for a war that will test the limits of Rama's resolve. Rama launches a monumental rescue mission,
forming an alliance with the monkey god Hanuman. This statue, a fixture of cultural reverence, captures Hanuman's immense scale, a representation of the physical strength and unwavering devotion required to face the Demon King. The Battle of Lanka unfolds as a war of light against dark. It culminates in the total defeat of Ravana, whose multi-headed form is consumed by fire, visualizing the eradication of external evil. This victory establishes Rama Raja, an era of human civilization governed by divine ethical principles and a commitment to the collective good. Strict adherence to one's dharma, even through intense personal suffering, serves as the ultimate weapon for conquering external corruption. While the Ramayana provides a blueprint of the ideal, the Mahabharata moves into a decaying era where morality is no longer black and white, but agonizingly gray. The core conflict is a bitter dynastic struggle for the throne of Hastinapura. The 5 righteous Pandava brothers face 100 deceitful cousins, the Kauravas, in a fight for the future of the kingdom. The Kauravas do not use a traditional army to seize power. They use a rigged game of dice to systemically steal the kingdom and force the Pandavas into a humiliating 13-year exile. This leads to the 18-day Kurukshetra War. Unlike the conflict in the Ramayana, the enemies here are not monsters from distant lands, but beloved uncles, teachers, and blood relatives. The Mahabharata explores how to navigate duty when the very systems meant to govern society are corrupt, and every choice carries a devastating personal cost. On the eve of the war, the supreme archer Arjuna drops his bow, paralyzed by the moral horror of slaughtering his own family members to win a throne. In this bronze sculpture, we see Vishnu's 8th avatar, Krishna, acting as Arjuna's charioteer. Krishna pauses time on the battlefield to deliver the Bhagavad Gita, a discourse designed to break Arjuna's moral paralysis. Krishna argues that because the soul is immortal, the death of the physical body is insignificant. He tells Arjuna that he must fight to stop tyranny because it is his sacred duty as a warrior, not because he seeks vengeance. He introduces the concept of nishkama karma, selfless action. This is the practice of fulfilling one's duty while remaining totally detached from the rewards, fruits, or personal consequences of that action. Performing righteous duty, unclouded by ego or grief, represents the highest form of spiritual discipline. The Ramayana models righteousness against external threats, while the Mahabharata explores the weight of duty amidst systemic decay. These epics serve as a map of the human mind. The 5 Pandava brothers represent our higher senses striving for truth and order. Surrounding them are the 100 Kauravas, the chaotic tendencies of the ego attempting to usurp our awareness. By mastering action aligned with duty, humans reach the state of moksha, or liberation.
As dusk falls over modern India, a bustling metropolis ignites with millions of lights. For over 1 billion people, this is stepping into ancient history. Take a close look at the text on this ancient Sanskrit manuscript. While the pantheons of Greece and Rome have mostly faded into museum artifacts and marble ruins, the deities recorded on these pages still dictate the rhythm of daily life. This diagram illustrates a core philosophical tension. Dharma, righteousness and order, pushes against adharma, chaos and tyranny. The mechanism deciding the winner is karma. It proves the universe's balance is entirely decided by individual human actions. These festivals serve as the physical architectures where ancient moral frameworks are actively reenacted. The mythological calendar tests this philosophy, starting at the individual level. According to legend, a demon king named Hiranyakashipu secured a blessing of near invincibility. Drunk on this power, he demanded that his entire kingdom worship him alone, but his own son, Prahlad, refused. Prahlad remained devoted to the god Vishnu. To eliminate this defiance, the king conspired to have his sister, Holika, carry Prahlad into a blazing pyre. Because of his unwavering devotion, Vishnu intervened. Prahlad walked out unharmed, while Holika burned.
In this high-angle photograph, you can see a massive bonfire surrounded by a modern crowd. This ritual is Holika Dahan. On the night before Holi, communities physically recreate that pyre to symbolize the literal incineration of evil and arrogance. The morning after the fire, we see scenes exactly like this, clouds of pink and white powder covering massive crowds. With the tyrant defeated, the festival of Holi signals the arrival of spring, allowing people to blur social boundaries in a shared celebration of survival. Holi establishes the baseline of Dharma. It demonstrates that righteousness begins with individual faith, and that a single person's devotion can withstand a direct trial by fire. But sometimes tyranny scales up. When the buffalo demon Mahishasura acquired invincible power, even the supreme deities could not defeat him individually. They had to pool their energy over 9 nights, a period commemorated today as Navaratri. You can see the result of that pooled energy in this ornate, multi-armed idol. This is goddess Durga, an avatar created specifically to wield the combined weapons of the gods, track down Mahishasura, and destroy him. At the exact same time in the mythological calendar, a parallel war unfolds. This illustration shows Lord Rama drawing his bow against Ravana, a 10-headed demon king who had abducted Rama's wife, Sita, triggering a massive geopolitical conflict. Rama's victory over Ravana is celebrated as Dasara. The name literally combines the Sanskrit words dasha, meaning 10, and hara, meaning defeat. To mark the defeat of the 10-headed king today, communities build towering paper and wood effigies of Ravana. By igniting them in public squares, crowds physically manifest the destruction of tyranny. Performers dressed as Rama, Lakshmana, and Hanuman take the stage behind fireworks to reenact the epic. Through these local plays, known as Ram Leela, the ancient war is broadcast directly to the public. Dasara scales Dharma up to the community level. It proves that defeating entrenched cosmic-level chaos requires collective effort, shared resources, and a very public destruction of ego. Once the wars are won and the demons are slain, the calendar shifts to the aftermath. After 14 years of exile and a brutal war in Lanka, Lord Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana finally began their journey home to Ayodhya. Overjoyed that their rightful king had survived, the citizens of Ayodhya stepped out into the pitch-black night. They lit rows of small oil lamps to guide the royal family through the darkness and safely back into the city. The festival we know as Diwali literally translates to row of lights. Look at this night view of the steps in Varanasi. To create those endless rows of illumination across the country, vendors stock entire market stalls with traditional clay diyas, allowing millions of families to physically bring that same welcoming light into their own homes. While Jains, Sikhs, and Buddhists all celebrate Diwali to mark different historical events within their own faiths, the action holds a universal meaning: the absolute victory of knowledge over ignorance. Diwali resolves the mythological cycle. It guarantees that the effort to maintain Dharma is worth it, because after the grueling battles against chaos, order, light, and prosperity will systematically return.
We hope you enjoyed our look at Hindu mythology. Between 800 and 600 BCE, the ancient Indian mind turned inward, shifting religious focus from external sacrifices to a deep, internal examination of the soul. This era produced the Upanishads, texts that laid a theoretical basis for Hindu cosmology and the nature of existence. Hindu scriptures are categorized into 2 forms of transmission. Shruti, which is heard, includes the Vedas and Upanishads as eternal truths. Smriti, which is remembered, includes human traditions, morals, and legends like the Puranas and the Ramayana. The Vedas represent stages of spiritual evolution. They begin with the Samhitas and Brahmanas, texts focused on rituals and hymns. The journey progresses through the Aranyakas, a shift toward mysticism, culminating in the Upanishads, which focus entirely on self-realization and ultimate reality. The Chandogya Upanishad narrates the instruction of Svetaketu, where a father asks his son to break a banyan fruit. The son finds tiny seeds, and when he breaks a seed, he sees nothing. The father reveals that the essence, the invisible reality, is the self of all that is. That is the true, that is the self, and you are that self, Svetiketu. The banyan seed illustrates the core premise of Vedanta. The visible world is an emanation of an invisible, fundamental reality. The mighty tree is the macro, the physical universe. The tiny seed is the micro, the limit of perception. The unperceivable essence is the invisible, Atman or Brahman, the blueprint for all existence. The Taittiriya Upanishad describes the self as 5 intersecting layers, or koshas. These range from the outermost physical sheath, Annamaya Kosha, to the innermost bliss sheath, Anandamaya Kosha, which is the final veil before the true self, Atman. The Mundaka Upanishad warns that those who regard ritual offerings and humanitarian works as the highest good are ignorant fools. They enjoy temporary rewards in heaven but are reborn. Only the wise, contemplating the source of the universe, are freed from impurities to dwell with the immortal self. The Mundaka Upanishad defines 2 paths. The path of the ignorant, driven by desire, leads to cyclical existence, samsara. The path of the wise, driven by tranquility and knowledge, jnana, leads to imperishable freedom and union with the self, moksha. Human existence is governed by the wheel of samsara, the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, bound by attachment to the fruits of action, karma. Liberation requires nishkama karma, or selfless action, providing the escape velocity to attain moksha. Vedanta describes 14 realms of existence, or lokas, as a spectrum of consciousness. The 7 lower worlds represent disharmony, while the 7 upper worlds represent balance, spiritual enlightenment, and high vibrational unity. The ascent through the upper worlds culminates in Satyaloka, the abode of truth. This state of being is pure samadhi, characterized by the complete absence of grief, aging, death, and rebirth. It is the realization where the individual soul, Atman, and the supreme cosmic reality, Brahman, are united. Tattvam Asi, or you are that, is the deepest revelation of the Upanishads. It is the understanding that Atman, the inner reality, and Brahman, the cosmic reality, are identical. The invisible essence is not an external place to be found. It is the ultimate phenomenon located within. The Upanishads serve as a roadmap of inner evolution. They remind us that while we navigate the duties and illusions of the material world, our ultimate essence remains untouched. The journey is simply returning to what we already are.
Before the first islands formed, the universe existed as a nebulous, churning mass, a formless chaos where spiritual and physical realms had yet to separate. Order began with the arrival of Izanagi and Izanami. The ancient heavenly gods tasked this divine couple with a single command: to solidify the drifting, unstable earth into a home. Standing upon the floating bridge of heaven, they lowered a jeweled spear into the brine below. When they withdrew the blade, the falling droplets solidified, forming the island of Onagoro. The couple descended to this first solid ground to procreate the rest of the archipelago. In this tradition, the geography of Japan is not a product of chance, but a deliberate architecture birthed from divine command. This creative era ended in tragedy when Izanami gave birth to the god of fire. The heat of the birth burned her fatally, making her the first living being to experience death and descend into the underworld. Stricken by the first loss the world had ever known, Izanagi pursued his wife into Yomi, the land of darkness, to retrieve her soul. In the shadows, Izanami warned him not to look at her, but Izanagi lost his patience. He lit a tooth of his comb as a torch, revealing a horrific sight. His wife's body was now a rotting, infested corpse. Terrified, Izanagi fled back toward the entrance of the underworld. He escaped just in time to roll a massive boulder over the opening, creating a barrier between the realms of the living and the dead. This trauma introduced the Shinto concept of kagare, or spiritual pollution. It proved that even the gods were vulnerable to the defilement of death, necessitating a way to restore purity to the world. To remove the pollution of the underworld, Izanagi performed a cleansing ritual in a river, an act of misogi. This act became the foundation for all future Shinto purification practices. As he washed his face, 3 high gods were born from his features. Amaterasu, the sun goddess, emerged from his left eye, Tsukuyomi, the moon god, from his right, and Susanoo, the storm god, from his nose. While his siblings took their places in the sky, Susanoo remained unruly. He went on a destructive rampage through Amaterasu's celestial realm, destroying her rice fields and defiling her sacred halls in a fit of impetuous rage. This sibling rivalry represents the eternal tension in the natural world, the dependable order of the sun versus the chaotic, uncontrollable power of the storm. Terrified by her brother's violence, Amaterasu fled and sealed herself inside the heavenly rock cave. Her isolation plunged the world into total darkness. Without the sun, the world's energy withered and life began to die. The other gods gathered outside the cave to lure her out using ingenuity rather than force. They placed a bronze mirror and a curved jewel on a tree and staged a raucous, indecent dance that caused the assembly to roar with laughter. Amaterasu peeked out to see what could cause such joy in a world without light. She glimpsed her reflection in the mirror and was so captivated by the radiant image that the other gods pulled her from the cave. Light returned to the universe immediately. As punishment for causing the darkness, the gods banished Susanoo from the heavens, sending him down to the earthly plane. The gods restored the sun through ritual ingenuity, cementing the mirror and the jewel as sacred instruments for maintaining cosmic order. Now a wanderer on earth, the exiled Susanoo arrived in the land of Izumo. There he met an elderly couple weeping over the fate of their last daughter. They were being terrorized by Yamata no Orochi, an 8-headed serpent that had already devoured 7 of their children and was returning to claim the last. Susanoo offered to slay the beast. He ordered the couple to prepare 8 vats of strong sake and place them behind an 8-gate fence along the serpent's path. When the serpent arrived, each head drank until it fell into a drunken stupor. Susanoo then drew his sword and severed the heads one by one, ending the monster's reign of terror. By slaying the serpent, Susanoo shifts his place in the pantheon. The destructive celestial outcast becomes the first heroic protector of human civilization. While cutting through the serpent's tail, Susanoo discovered a great sword hidden within. He gifted this blade, later known as Kusanagi, to his sister Amaterasu as a gesture of reconciliation. With the heavens at peace, Amaterasu chose her grandson, Naniki, to descend to Earth and establish a lasting rule over the islands of Japan. To validate his authority, she gave him a divine mandate consisting of 3 treasures: the mirror, the jewel, and the sword. Each artifact represents a cardinal virtue of a ruler. The mirror stands for wisdom, the jewel signifies benevolence, and the sword symbolizes valor. These 3 items became the imperial regalia of Japan. Legend states they were passed down in total secrecy through the generations, from the first emperor, Jimmu, to the present day. These artifacts remain central to the legitimacy of the throne. During his 2019 enthronement, Emperor Naruhito formally took possession of the shrouded regalia, continuing a ritual tradition over 1,000 years old. When the indigenous animism of Shinto met the imported theology of Buddhism in 6th century Japan, the 2 systems were braided together, avoiding conflict. This fusion is known as Shinbutsu Shugo. It was an intentional effort to harmonize native kami with Buddhist figures, creating a unified spiritual defense for the Japanese islands. This alliance is visible at thousands of Inari shrines. Passing through these endless torii gates marks a crossing into a space of absolute sacred order. Within these perimeters, the identities of the gods merged. Inari, the Shinto deity of agriculture, became synonymous with the Buddhist deity Dakinetan, who was often depicted riding a white fox. The kitsune, magical, multi-tailed foxes, stand as the primary guardians of this merged order. They serve as divine messengers, tasked with protecting the shrine's sanctity. These stone foxes are often depicted clenching heavy bronze keys in their jaws. These keys represent the dual nature of Inari's protection. They secure the community's physical rice granaries, while also unlocking the path to spiritual wisdom. The shrine functions as a safe perimeter of cosmic order and human prosperity. But that order ends at the tree line, where the landscape transitions into a much more chaotic, unpredictable wilderness. Deep in the misty mountain forests, divine order gives way to the inherent chaos of the natural world. This is the territory of the yokai. These supernatural entities are the personifications of phenomena that humans once found unexplainable, from the roar of a sudden landslide to the strange sounds of a forest at night. The Tengu are the traditional enforcers of these peaks. Originally feared as bird-like demons of war, they evolved into powerful mountain guardians and masters of swordsmanship who demand respect from all who enter their woods. Their influence remains a part of modern mountain life. During local festivals, communities still carry these iconic red, long-nosed masks to honor the martial spirits believed to inhabit the slopes. In this hierarchy, humans are guests. Yokai, like the Tengu, serve as nature's border guards, ensuring that those who cross the threshold into the wild do so with the proper reverence. That vigilance extends to the water. In rivers and ponds, the kappa, a turtle-like humanoid, is known to drag unsuspecting victims beneath the surface. The kappa requires a bowl-shaped depression on its head, a sara, to remain filled with river water for its supernatural strength. Because the kappa is obsessively polite, a human can survive by bowing deeply. The kappa bows back, the water spills, leaving it powerless. Yokai also inhabit the human home through objects known as tsukumogami. Folklore suggests that everyday tools, from lanterns to sandals, develop a soul and come to life after reaching their 100th year. These objects often become resentful if they have been neglected or discarded by their owners. For example, an old paper umbrella might transform into the kasa obake, a one-eyed spirit that hops through the house to startle those who forgot it. Whether guarding the rivers or animating old umbrellas, these yokai serve a specific social function. They enforce a code of conduct that punishes wastefulness, carelessness, and the breaking of etiquette. Beyond the physical dangers of the forest or the river, there is a final layer of the spirit realm that exists entirely within the human mind. These are the yurei, human souls anchored to the living world by violent trauma or intense unresolved grudges. A yurei is physically defined by its lack of a connection to the earth. They are typically depicted without legs or feet, their spirits trailing off into a mist that reflects their status as entities trapped between worlds. Their motives are focused. While a yokai might attack anyone who enters its territory, a yurei is a relentless hunter, targeting the specific individuals responsible for the trauma that keeps them from passing on. Their arrival is heralded by hitodama, eerie, floating ghost fires that drift through darkness, signaling a breach in the boundary between the living and the dead. This completes the spiritual landscape. The kami preserve the order of civilization, and the yokai guard the edges of the natural world. But the yurei represent the internal borders of guilt and memory.
The ancient pre-Islamic world was built upon an incredibly fragile cosmic structure, suspended over a terrifying and infinite void. This universe functioned through a rigid hierarchy, 7 superimposed heavens stacked directly over 7 corresponding Earths. These realms were isolated by an immense, silent scale. Ancient tradition held that the distance between each layered realm was a 500-year journey. Beneath the lowest Earth stood the foundation of the entire system, a colossal angel tasked with physically shouldering the weight of every heaven and earth. This model made existence a physical, precarious construct. For the inhabitants of the surface, reality was stable, only as long as its physical pillars held. If the foundation failed, the world would drop into the abyss. To prevent the angel from slipping in the void, God provided a footing, a solid, glowing slab of green emerald or ruby. That gemstone platform rested on the back of Kuyuta, a cosmic bull with 40,000 legs and 40,000 eyes staring into the dark. Kuyuta acted as a mechanical regulator for the human world. When the bull inhaled and exhaled in the depths of the void, the movement physically pushed and pulled the tides of the Earth's oceans. The bull was sustained by Bahamut, an incomprehensibly massive fish swimming through a cosmic sea.
To explain Bahamut's size, medieval writers noted that if all of Earth's oceans were placed in one of the fish's nostrils, they would be as small as a mustard seed dropped in the desert. Beneath the cosmic sea lies the final layer of the hierarchy, Falak, a giant serpent lurking in the bottomless darkness. This vertical descent reveals a universe of precarious order, propped up by a chain of leviathans. Because humans were powerless against the monsters beneath them, they looked upward for protection. At the geographic center of the human realm was the city of Mecca. The Kaaba served as a sanctuary for this world, housing roughly 360 idols that represented localized order. Hubal was the chief god of the local Quraysh tribe. As a moon deity, he was the final authority in divination ceremonies where tribal leaders used arrows to determine the path of their future. While Hubal ruled the sanctuary, the spiritual anchors of the peninsula were the triple goddesses. Their domains governed the entire cycle of human life. Al-Lat was the mother goddess, representing prosperity and springtime. She refused to tolerate bloodshed. This peaceful nature is depicted in the Lion of Al-Lat, a sculpture showing a fierce lion shielding a vulnerable gazelle between its paws. The pantheon at the Kaaba provided a system of local control, offering humans a way to negotiate for survival in a universe held up by forces far beyond their understanding. Beyond the mother, there was Al-Uzza, the maiden of the morning star. She governed warfare and justice, and was venerated as a patroness of power among the monumental stone facades of Petra. The cycle ended with Manat, the ancient crone. She was the personification of fate and the inevitability of the grave. Manat's authority was physically inscribed on tombs, where she was invoked to lay curses on anyone who violated the resting place of the dead. These deities provided structure from birth to death, but their power ended at the edge of the sanctuary. To leave the settlement was to leave their protection and enter a much more chaotic domain. Leaving the city meant stepping into the deep desert wastes, where the rules of the gods were replaced by the unpredictable shadows of the dunes. These wastes belonged to the Jinn, a parallel race forged from smokeless fire. Unlike the mechanical cosmic beasts or the transactional gods of the city, Jinn possessed absolute free will. They could be benign, mischievous, or deadly, depending entirely on their own choice. The most powerful were the Marids, associated with the sea, and the Ifrits, who lived in organized societies beneath the earth. Travelers specifically feared the ghouls, shapeshifters that took the form of hyenas to lure victims away from their caravans. They were believed to haunt desolate locations, like the ruins of Palmyra, waiting for anyone seeking shelter in the dark. Folklore also spoke of the Nasnas, a creature split vertically down the middle, possessing half a head and half a body, yet moving with lethal speed. This universe of world-bearing leviathans and free-willed spirits provided the narrative framework for later Arabian storytelling. This is the Arabian Peninsula. In the ancient world, these vast isolating stretches of sand functioned as a forge. Survival here required specific martial and moral virtues, capable of withstanding months of isolation and lethal heat. One of the most enduring figures from this era was Antara ibn Shaddad. Born to an Arab noble and an enslaved Ethiopian woman, Antara was an outcast by birth, forced to spend his youth tending camels at the very bottom of the social hierarchy. He broke those social chains through warfare. During 40 years of conflict, known as the War of Dahis and Al-Gabra, Antara established himself as a powerhouse on the battlefield, eventually earning his freedom through combat. But physical strength alone did not secure a name. In this environment, a hero's legacy relied on his ability to balance the violence of the spear with the refining virtues of chivalry and poetry. Leadership in a land of scarce resources was often defined by hospitality. The tribal chief Hatim al-Tai became a legend by treating extreme selflessness as the ultimate demonstration of power. When a starving traveler reached Hatim's camp during a famine, Hatim had no food to offer. He chose to slaughter his most valuable possession, his horse, simply to provide a meal for a stranger. While Hatim modeled the ideal moral character, others provided a different kind of survival tool, supernatural foresight. This was the role of Zarqa al-Yamama, the prophetess with piercing blue eyes. Zarqa could see enemies approaching from 3 days away. She warned her tribe that a rival army was moving toward them, hiding behind uprooted trees. But her people dismissed her as mad. They were slaughtered where they sat. Zarqa's death highlights the boundary of mortal effort. No amount of bravery, generosity, or foresight could protect a tribe once the broader, indifferent forces of the world began to move against them. As the focus shifts from the desert floor to the sky, the scale of danger increases. The Arabian skies were ruled by the roc, or rook, the mythological apex predator of the natural world. This diagram illustrates the creature's reported scale. Starting with a human, we scale up to a full-grown elephant. The roc dwarfs both, possessing a 40-foot wingspan and talons strong enough to lift a rhinoceros off the ground to feed its young. Sailors reported that the roc would hunt by dropping massive boulders from the clouds to crush passing merchant ships, sinking them instantly. If the roc represented brute force, the anka represented the eerie and the mystical. It was described as a bird with the face of a human and 4 pairs of wings. The anka's story is a tragedy of corruption. Created in total perfection, it eventually warped into a plague that destroyed the land it was meant to inhabit, leading to its eventual exile or death. These monsters provided the ancient world with a way to visualize the uncontrollable. They were a framework for sudden disasters that left humans with no hope of defense. If a single warrior cannot stop a roc, what happens when an entire civilization tries to rival the power of the divine? This is the story of Iram of the Pillars, a city of unimaginable wealth built by the giant tribe of Ad. They were masters of architecture, filling the desert with towers that reached for the sky. But their building mastery turned into hubris. The Ad tribe began to believe their stone monuments made them invincible, leading them to ignore the prophets who warned against their growing arrogance. The response was a violent, unyielding sandstorm. It battered the city for 7 nights and 8 days without a moment of relief. Today, excavations like these show us the archaeological reality behind the myth. Real cities genuinely buried by the shifting environment. Iram was pushed so deep into the Rub al-Khali desert that its towers simply disappeared into the dunes. The legends of Antara, the mythical roc, and the city of Iram connect to form a single portrait of life on the peninsula. Before the ocean, there was Tepo, an endless, suffocating darkness. The Sky Father and Earth Mother are locked in an eternal, oppressive embrace. Their divine children are trapped in the crushing pressure between them. They exist in a void, desperate for light, space, and the ability to grow. Tane, the god of the forest, devises a violent solution. He lies on his back against his mother, raises his massive legs against his father, and pushes. With immense, sustained force, he slowly tears the earth and sky apart. Light immediately floods the universe. As space opens up, the separated lovers bleed, staining the earth with red clay. Their eternal tears of longing fall to the ground as heavy rain and morning mist. This violent breaking of stasis establishes the operating premise of the Polynesian worldview. Life requires space, and creation demands the painful tearing apart of the old order. Across the vast network of the Polynesian Triangle, different island groups hold distinct accounts of this cosmic awakening. In Tahitian traditions, the supreme creator Tauroa exists entirely alone in a state of absolute silence, ultimately cracking his way out of an egg-like cosmic shell to form the sky. Hawaiian narratives describe the universe blooming from a massive cosmic gourd. The lid is thrown open to form the heavens, and its seeds are cast upward to become the stars. This text documents varied traditions, like Tagaloa hurling stones from the heavens to birth island chains. Further down, it traces unbroken lineages. Primeval deities form gods of nature, who in turn give birth to the island's high chiefs. In this worldview, the physical world and humanity exist as literal extensions of a celestial family tree, a direct bloodline originating at the moment of creation. The first entities to populate this newly lit world are Titans, Tane governing the forests, Tangaroa ruling the deep ocean, Tu commanding war, and Rongo overseeing peace and agriculture. These deities operate as volatile, high-stakes managers of the Pacific's extreme environment, their influence felt in every breaking wave and shifting wind. Their specific domains represent the exact elements required for survival. A storm at sea, a successful harvest, or a safe canoe voyage depends entirely on the immediate temperaments of these siblings. To carve a hole from a massive tree, or to cast a net into the surf, is to negotiate directly with Tane and Tangaroa. Every interaction with nature is a physical interaction with a god. This divine conflict extends into the very rock of the earth, an ongoing process clearly visible in the Hawaiian archipelago. The geological volatility is the raw combat between Pele, the goddess of fire and volcanoes, and her sister Namaka, the goddess of the sea. Hunted by Namaka's ocean waves, Pele fled across the Pacific. Each time she attempted to build a safe home, she struck the earth with her fire, forging the islands of Kauai, Molokai, and Maui in her wake. Pele ultimately survived her sister's pursuit, establishing her fiery throne at the Halemaumau crater on the Big Island of Hawaii. This historical photograph of the Kilauea eruption captures the visceral reality of her enduring power. Her elder brother, the shark god Kamohoali, occupies a sacred cliff overlooking the crater. Ash and smoke never drift over his position, maintaining a strict divine hierarchy that even Pele obeys. The geography of the Pacific serves as the literal, scarred battlefield and resting place of divine beings. Building human societies in an environment managed by warring gods and extreme natural forces required a precise system of survival. This system relied on navigating the invisible physics of the Polynesian universe. The core of this framework is mana, the divine authority and supernatural power that flows directly from the gods. This diagram maps how that energy functions. It requires Maori, a vital life force acting as a physical vessel, to bind this divine energy to tangible things like rivers, forests, and human beings. Because mana is incredibly volatile, it is wrapped in tapu, strict boundaries and sacred restrictions designed to protect the energy from being corrupted or drained. Breaking a tapu shatters this containment shield. The mana rapidly leaks away, inviting supernatural retaliation and societal collapse. This triad governed social structure. A chief's influence, seen here in this portrait of a Hawaiian royal woman flanked by feathered staves, was a direct manifestation of her mana. It had to be constantly proven in reality and rigorously protected by tapu. Mana, Maori, and tapu provide a strict survival protocol, the containment shield for the universe's divine nuclear reactor. To safely manage and ground this terrifying cosmic energy, ancient Polynesians turned to monumental engineering. Across the islands, they constructed vast, open-air stone temple complexes known as marae or heiau, built from dense volcanic rock. These structures function as active portals where the physical world deliberately intersects with the divine. Here, priests conducted extreme and complex rites, from human sacrifice to the inauguration of paramount chiefs. Every action within these walls was designed exclusively to channel and direct raw mana. These temple complexes served as the vital grounding wires for the volatile energy of the gods, keeping human society tethered to and protected by the cosmic order. This cosmic system also operates on an intimate, deeply personal scale, weaving through individual family bloodlines. Ancestral spirits, known as aumakua, return to the physical world in the form of animals, like owls or sharks, to guide and protect their living descendants. These animal guardians represent an unbroken chain of genealogy. The lineage traces from the watchful shark up to the human chief, back to the elemental gods of nature, and finally to the primordial void itself. In the Polynesian worldview, no individual walks alone. You stand in the light created by Tane, upon islands forged by Pele, protected by the tapu of your ancestors, and fueled forever by the mana of the universe.
The Polynesian Triangle covers 40 million square kilometers. In the open Pacific, there are no landmarks, only a featureless horizon stretching for thousands of miles. For 3,000 years, the voyagers who settled these waters did so without a single written word. They had no paper to record their coordinates and no books to store their history. Their solution was to anchor their knowledge to the physical world itself. They wove their survival data into a series of narratives, beginning with the demigod Maui. According to tradition, the sun once raced across the sky too quickly for work to be done. Maui climbed the volcano Haleakala and used a lasso woven from his sister's hair to trap the sun's rays, forcing it to move slowly. He then addressed the very air. In the beginning, the sky hung so low it crushed the plants and forced humans to crawl. Maui pushed his feet against the earth and his head against the heavens, thrusting the sky upward so humanity could walk upright. Finally, he secured sustenance. After slaying the giant eel god Tetuna, Maui buried the head in the corner of his house. From that spot grew the first coconut tree, a plant that provided wood, essential weaving fiber, and fresh drinking water, and whose fruit still bears the face of the defeated god. By defining the day, the sky, and the food supply, these stories provided the foundational conditions for human life. Maui did not just perform miracles, he constructed a logical, living universe. The islands themselves were pulled from the deep through an act of violent exertion. Maui used a hook carved from the jawbone of his grandmother, baiting it with his own blood before casting it into the sea. When he pulled, the ocean floor rumbled, and new landmasses were dragged to the surface. But his success ended when he attempted to conquer death itself. Maui sought to steal immortality for mankind, a prize that would have made humanity equal to the gods. He tried to destroy the goddess of death, Hine Nui Tipho, from within. He entered her sleeping body, but the laughter of a small forest bird woke her. She crushed Maui between her obsidian teeth, ending his life. Maui's failure established a permanent boundary. It cemented the reality of human mortality, shifting the burden of survival away from the demigods and onto the lineage of mortal men. The world humanity inherited was defined by these jagged volcanic craters and the raw, unrefined earth Maui left behind. To navigate this environment, they looked to the goddesses who remained. Hina, the mother of Maui, fled the earth to dwell in the moon, becoming its guardian and a protector of travelers in the night. On the mortal shores, the line between myth and history was held by figures like Nafanua, the warrior queen of Samoa. A historical figure from the 16th century, Nafanua ended a long civil war by wielding 4 sacred weapons carved from the toa tree. Her tactical victories brought peace to the islands, leading her people to deify her as a goddess of war. These figures, one in the sky, one in the history books, provided a bridge. They allowed a people to see their own struggles reflected in the movements of the moon and the legacies of their chiefs. For the ancient wayfinders traversing the Pacific, the dark night sky was much more than just a distant home for the gods. It was a precise, functional guide for navigating the open ocean. They recognized the curving stars of the constellation Scorpius as Mana Ia Kalani, Maui's fishhook. When this constellation rises at dusk in mid-May, it serves as a directional bearing. For a navigator on the water, the position of the hook indicates a southeasterly route. The Pleiades cluster, known as Matariki, functioned as a calendar. Its appearance in the sky signaled the end of the harvest and the new year. By casting their navigational data as a cycle of stories, Polynesians ensured that vital information could be memorized and recalled across generations, enabling them to cross the Pacific with confidence. Because there were no written archives, the ancestral record and the maps of the stars had to be carried on the only permanent surface available, the human body. This is the tatau.
The process is a test of endurance, involving a master tattooist pressing ink into the skin through a rhythmic tapping of bone and wood tools. The male paya covers the body from the waist to the knees in dense, intricate patterns. It is a visual record of a man's courage and his lifelong obligation to serve his community. The female malu is lighter and more open, characterized by diamond-shaped motifs. It represents her role as a source of shelter and protection for her family. These markings are not decorative. They represent mana, a sacred power that physically binds the person to the cosmic order and the history of their ancestors. The ink on the skin is only part of the record. The history of the islands is fully activated through the breath and the movement of the people. Ceremonies like the Maori haka serve as a kinetic record of genealogy. Through chant and posture, the performers physically reenact the stories of their lineage. We see this continuity in the hula of Hawaii, where the hands and feet describe the movements of the gods and the natural world. In these movements, the ancient wayfinders and demigods are not just remembered, they are effectively brought back into the present with every step. The Polynesian universe survives today because it was built to endure without a written archive. It demonstrates that when a myth is embodied in the skin, the breath, and the movement of a people, it becomes an enduring means of survival.
Before time or light, the universe began as Ginnungagap, a grassless, bottomless abyss of absolute silence. From the north, Niflheim pushed outward, sending a creeping advance of heavy, crystalline rime ice and freezing venom that clashed with the void. In the south, Muspelheim surged with primordial fire. It was a realm of molten flecks and bright sparks, constantly erupting into the darkness. These two absolute extremes, lethal frost and raging heat, expanded until the vacuum between them could no longer hold. The collision created a thermodynamic pressure that demanded a physical resolution. When the heat of the south met the rime of the north, the ice began to thaw and drip. The frozen void started to weep. Those droplets of venomous water took the form of Ymir, a giant of unfathomable scale. He was the first living being, a hermaphroditic entity coagulated from the melting frost. From that same thaw emerged the cow, Audhumla. As Ymir slept in the void, he was sustained by the 4 rivers of milk that flowed from her teats. This was a universe of stasis. Ymir merely existed, slept, and produced more giants from his own sweat. This iteration of life was pure chaos. It would take a deliberate act of violence to turn this body into a world. As Audhumla licked the salt-caked ice for nourishment, she uncovered the first of the gods, a man named Buri. Buri had a son named Bor, who married the giantess Besla. Together they produced 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. The 3 brothers represented the emergence of order. They looked at the thundering, aimless mass of Ymir and his offspring, and saw only a chaotic obstacle to the universe they intended to build. The 3 brothers attacked. They ambushed and slaughtered Ymir in the center of the void. The giant's blood gushed from his wounds in such a volume that it created a cosmic flood, drowning nearly every other frost giant in existence. Structure would not arise from nothing, but from the reordering of this butchered matter. In the Norse mind, order began with a kill. The gods dragged Ymir's colossal corpse into the middle of Ginnungagap. The giant was no longer a being. He was now the raw material for geography. This diagram illustrates the translation. The gods took Ymir's shattered bones to form the world's mountains. They packed down his flesh to create the soil, and filled the negative space with his blood, forming the vast seas. Above it all, they hoisted Ymir's skull. They set it in 4 corners to create the dome of the sky, with his brains thrown upward to form the clouds. The shining stars were not independent lights. The gods caught the stray flying sparks from Muspelheim and trapped them within the curvature of the giant's skull to mark the passage of time. Our physical reality is the product of this cosmic dissection. Every hill and every ocean is simply a repurposed part of a fallen monster. Even with the world forged, the gods knew it was fragile. Beyond the edges lay the hostile remnants of the giant race, waiting to reclaim the void. To protect the center of the world, they ripped the coarse eyebrows from Ymir's face and used them to build a massive fortification. They called this enclosure Midgard.
In the quiet aftermath of their creation, Odin, Vili, and Ve walked along the shoreline of the new blood ocean. There, they found 2 pieces of lifeless driftwood washed up by the tide, a log of ash and a log of elm. This was the state of the universe, a massive armored enclosure of bone and blood, and at its center, 2 pieces of mundane, fragile timber. The gods leaned over the wood. Odin breathed into them the spirit of life. Vili gave them wit and feeling, and Ve gave them the form and senses of humans. The rigid wood fibers softened. Gray bark took on the warmth and porosity of living skin. These beings were named Ask and Embla, the first man and woman, and the ancestors of all humanity. These pulse-beating, warm creatures stood at the center of an environment constructed from rotting remains, soft tissue and spirit, housed within the eyelashes of a titan. In this universe, humanity is fragile timber sheltered by the skull of the dead, existing miraculously on the precipice between the advancing frost and the eternal fire.
In ancient Norse cosmology, the universe operates as a living structure. An immense ash tree called Yggdrasil acts as the central axis of reality, its roots and branches physically holding all existence together. This map shows the basic geography of the 9 worlds suspended within the tree. You have Asgard high up in the canopy, Midgard in the center where humans live, the Light Elves over in Alfheim, and the Master Smiths laboring deep underground in Nidavellir. This organic network is constantly under siege, gnawed at the roots by the dragon Nidhogg, and weathered by stags in its branches. To keep the tree alive, the gods must gather daily at the Well of Fate to water its roots, making the physical survival of the cosmos a daily labor of divine governance. But that governance is failing. The divine rulers are divided into 2 distinct tribes with completely incompatible worldviews, making it impossible to maintain the rituals that keep the tree from rotting. The first tribe is the Aesir. Led by Odin and Thor, they represent absolute martial law, the destructive power of the storm, and the unyielding order of iron. Their counterparts are the Vanir. Gods like Njord, Freyr, and Freya derive power from the damp earth and wild prosperity. Instead of steel, they wield a reality-bending form of magic known as satyr. The friction between these 2 factions is absolute. You have the rigid, top-down hierarchy of the Aesir pressing directly against the feral, untamed mysticism of the Vanir. Because neither side can tolerate the other's methods, the cooperative labor required to sustain Yggdrasil has stopped, leaving the cosmos to face an inevitable war. The conflict erupts when the Vanir's twisting magic infiltrates the sovereign stronghold of Asgard. The Aesir respond with overwhelming physical force, generating violent storms and hurling barrages of spears at their enemies. The Vanir bypass physical combat entirely. They deploy organic rot and dark enchantments to dismantle the Aesir's military machinery from within. The fighting drags on for years, exhausting both sides. The Aesir cannot smash the Vanir's magic, and the Vanir cannot weather the Aesir's physical might. Spears cannot pierce a spell of rot, and enchantments cannot silence a storm of iron. For the first time, both tribes look at a universe that neither can master alone. To end the slaughter, the 2 tribes turn to an ancient customary solution, striking a bitter truce secured by exchanging high-ranking hostages. The logic of the trade is simple. The Vanir hand over their most vital figures, Njord, Freyr, and Freya, to live in Asgard. In return, the Aesir send 2 of their own, the dim-witted Honir and the wise Mimir. But the exchange relies on deception. Honir is incapable of making a decision without Mimir constantly whispering instructions. Outraged, the Vanir execute Mimir, sever his head, and send it dripping back to Odin as a total rejection of the false treaty. This political failure leaves the tribes more divided than before, proving that simply trading individuals is not enough to repair a fractured world. With Mimir's head returned in a box, the gods realize that if they return to open warfare, the resulting chaos will leave Yggdrasil's roots completely untended, allowing the dragon and the rot to finally bring down the entire structure.
To prevent this collapse, both tribes gather in a dim hall. Setting down their weapons and their pride, they stand shoulder to shoulder and spit their essence into a single massive iron cauldron. From that mingled saliva, a new entity is born. His name is Kvasir, a being crafted directly from the union of storm and soil, martial law and wild magic. Kvasir wanders the cosmos, answering any question asked of him. He possesses the total knowledge of the universe because he is the only being to contain the perspectives of both warring extremes. This total synthesis, the mingling of iron and earth, is the only force capable of stabilizing the 9 worlds. Kvasir was the realization that the cosmos only holds when opposing powers are fused into one.
In the Norse cosmos, divinity is a trap. Unlike the omnipotent deities of other mythologies, the Aesir and Vanir live under a rigid, immutable schedule of doom. Every event, from a successful harvest to the eventual death of the gods, is recorded in a script that cannot be edited. The physical structure holding this reality together is Yggdrasil. This immense gray ash tree functions as a cosmic scaffold, its roots and branches plunging into the 9 distinct realms of gods, mortals, and the dead. Sitting at the base of this tree are the Norns, the ultimate authorities of the universe. They spend their days spinning and measuring out word, the invisible binding threads of fate that dictate the lifespan of every living being. Medieval manuscripts like this one preserve the identities of the 3 primary Norns, Urd, Verdandi, and Skuld. Together, they divide the labor of existence, weaving what has been, what is becoming, and what must necessarily occur. This carving depicts Odin, the Allfather, riding his 8-legged horse Sleipnir. Odin is famous for his sacrifices. He plucked out his own eye and hung himself from the world tree for 9 nights, just to gain the wisdom to see the future. However, that knowledge is a burden. It allows him to foresee his fate, but it provides no way to change it. This dynamic makes the Norse cosmos a tragic theater. It is a realm where every inhabitant is simply waiting in a staging area for a pre-written apocalypse. In Midgard, the human realm, the local population sought a way to intervene. They looked for cracks in the cosmic foundation, where they might influence their own threads rather than simply following the Norns' design. This search for influence led to the Volva. These were wandering mortal seeresses who practiced a trance-wrought sorcery called Satyr. To practice Satyr, a Volva would strike the earth with iron-shod staffs, burn toxic henbane to create a thick hallucinogide smoke, and use hide drums to reach a deep trance state. In this state, they claimed the ability to see the invisible threads of weird in the dark. By manipulating those threads, they could influence the outcome of battles or the health of a lineage, a power that commanded respect and fear from both kings and gods. Satyr functioned as an audacious cosmic loophole, a mortal attempt to interfere with a destiny that the Norns had intended to be final. While the Volva attempted to bend fate spiritually, others offered a more visceral, physical defiance. Certain beings refused to cross the threshold into the afterlife entirely. These were the Draugr, the again walkers. These swollen, black-blooded corpses possessed monstrous strength and a sentient malice that separated them from simple reanimated remains. This landscape shows the type of grassy burial hills where the Norse believed these entities lurked. A Draugr remained obsessed with the earthly world, violently hoarding the gold and grave goods buried within the mound. Any living soul who trespassed on this ground faced a terrifying physical threat, as the warden would burst through the soil to defend its hoard. The Draugr represent a physical rejection of weird. They are souls that refuse the Norns' final cut, clinging instead to the cold, damp earth of the living world. Eventually, the threats of fate reach a breaking point. The universe contains specific architects designed to ensure the cosmic weave finally unravels. This collapse begins with Loki. As a half-god, half-giant trickster, he acts as the necessary agent of chaos, the needle that pulls the entire weave apart. This red runic inscription, following a snake-like spiral,
illustrates the cultural impact of Loki's first monstrous child, Jormungandr. This world serpent is of such terrifying scale that it encircles the entire realm of humanity, holding its own tail in its mouth. Loki's second child is Fenrir, the great wolf. He is the beast of snapping iron, destined to break his chains and swallow Odin during the final conflict. The third child is Hel, the queen of the underworld. She governs Helheim, a lightless kingdom situated beneath the roots of the world tree, characterized by heavy fog, dark moss, and jagged cliffs. The Norns prophecy identifies these creatures as the final executioners of the cosmos. Their role is to finish the work of the three sisters, bringing an end to the current cycle of existence during Ragnarok. This reality shapes the ultimate Norse philosophy. Because destiny is fixed and the monsters are unavoidable, a hero's worth is not found in their ability to escape the end. It is measured by the ferocity with which they fight when the twilight falls.
Asgard, the realm of the Aesir, stands as a beacon of cosmic order. Its golden halls ring with the boasts of unyielding warrior gods. Yet every spear sharpened and every shield forged here is done with a singular, chilling knowledge. They are preparing for a war they are destined to lose. This manuscript preserves a poem called the Voluspa, the prophecy of the seeress. It lays out the entire lifespan of the universe, explicitly detailing how the cosmos will end. According to these verses, the fate of the gods is absolutely predetermined. Knowing this, Odin, the Allfather, spends his existence desperate to forestall the inevitable. He sacrifices his own eye for wisdom and sends his two ravens, Hugin and Munin, scouring the 9 realms for any hidden knowledge that might buy his pantheon more time. The timeline of destruction begins with an ecological collapse known as the Fimbulwinter. A relentless 3-year frost sets in. Ash and snow blot out the sun, plunging the world into a state of perpetual freezing twilight. Most mythologies promise ultimate victory for the forces of good. The Norse worldview offers something entirely different. The gods know they are marching toward their own graves, yet they choose to fight anyway, meeting inescapable ruin with an unbroken, heroic fatalism. As the Fimbulwinter starves the earth, human social order completely collapses. Midgard descends into what the texts call an axe age, a sword age, and a wolf age, where desperate survivors abandon kinship and morality just to stay alive. This social decay mirrors a physical unraveling. The magical ribbon Gleipnir, a chain forged by dwarves that held the colossal wolf Fenrir, finally snaps, unleashing a beast large enough to swallow the heavens. Deep in the ocean, the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, awakens. The creature's violent thrashing displaces so much water that it sends freezing tidal waves crashing over the shores of Men, drowning whatever land the winter hasn't already frozen. The foundations of the cosmos give way. Every oath, every chain, and every natural barrier that once held the universe together dissolves simultaneously, allowing chaos to consume the order of the gods. The visual signal that the end has arrived is a literal tearing of the sky. The fabric of the realms splits open, allowing the forces of chaos, the giants of fire and frost, to pour through the breach. At the edge of the Rainbow Bridge, the watchman Heimdall raises the Gallarhorn. He blows a bone-rattling blast that echoes through all 9 realms, calling the Aesir to muster on the Vigrid plain, knowing they are riding out to die. The battlefield presents a stark contrast. The shining, battle-worn gods of Asgard arrange their lines, holding their ground as they are forced to charge directly into the pitch-black maw of the advancing Jotnar army. The casualties begin immediately. The god Freyr faces Surtr, the leader of the fire giants. Because Freyr had previously surrendered his magical, self-fighting sword to win a bride, he is quickly cut down, armed only with an antler. The architects of cosmic order are now locked in combat with the specific avatars of chaos they spent their entire lives trying to suppress.
Their past decisions to bind, banish, or barter with these monsters guarantee their present destruction. Odin makes a final doomed charge against Fenrir. His spear and wisdom are useless. The Allfather is swallowed whole by the abyssal darkness of the great wolf's throat. Thor engages his eternal rival, Jormungandr. He swings his hammer, Mjolnir, and successfully crushes the serpent's skull. But covered in the monster's venom, the thunder god takes exactly 9 paces before collapsing dead into the mud. Nearby, Heimdall and the trickster Loki, bound by a long history of enmity, clash in the thickening ashfall. They strike simultaneous fatal blows, piercing one another and bleeding out side by side. With the defenders broken, Surtur unleashes a blinding, sun-bright heat from his sword. The flames catch the roots and branches of Yggdrasil, setting the cosmic world tree completely ablaze. The scorched earth gives way. The continents hiss as they slip entirely beneath the surface of a silent, boiling, pitch-black sea. The physical world is dead. The final submersion of the earth marks the end of the old world's blood debts and broken oaths. This total destruction clears the landscape of its ancient corruptions, fulfilling the prophecy that a purified world would rise from the silence of the sea. Eventually, the dark ocean breaks. A new earth breaches the surface, rising out of the water shockingly green, wet, and fertile, ready to sustain life without the need for human toil. The younger gods who survived the fire gather at Hodmimi's Holt, a sacred wood that escaped Surt's flames. They are joined by Balder and Hoder, brothers resurrected from the realm of the dead, returning to the light. In the fresh grass, they find the golden chess pieces that belonged to their fathers. Picking up the plain pieces establishes a tactile, emotional link to the world that was lost, honoring the old gods' memories. Humanity survives. 2 humans, Lif and Lifthrasir, emerge from the protective bark of the sacred wood, having sustained themselves on the morning dew, ready to repopulate the renewed earth. This narrative reveals the Norse belief in the cyclical nature of the universe. Within this cosmos, destruction is a required phase of transformation that allows a new, fertile order to emerge from the ashes of the old.
In the frozen expanses of the extreme north, survival requires an intimate relationship with the land. For the Sami people, this environment is deeply alive. Every mountain, river, and animal possesses its own soul, a consciousness that demands constant respect. This worldview is built upon a specific architecture of reality. The Sami envision 3 distinct realms: the upper world of the celestial deities, the middle world of humans and nature, and a lower world belonging to the spirits of the dead. A massive world pillar runs through the center of these layers, anchoring the earth and reaching up to the North Star. It serves a very practical purpose. The Sami view the sky as a physical weight that must be propped up to prevent it from crushing the worlds below. The Sami live within a precarious reality. To them, the universe is a fragile structure that requires constant spiritual maintenance. If that central pillar ever fails, the sky will collapse, ending life as they know it. Responsibility for that maintenance falls to Radian Ache, the supreme creator deity who resides at the highest point of the upper world. Radian Ache is characterized as an intellectual, distant god who is often depicted as sleeping. Despite his passivity, he performs a single vital function. He holds the top of the world pillar to maintain cosmic stability. Because the stability of the sky is so high stakes, the Sami performed specific rituals to reinforce the god's strength. Every autumn, they would sacrifice a bull reindeer and smear its blood on a forked wooden pole, a physical proxy for the massive pillar holding up the heavens. Cosmic stability depends on this ongoing exchange. The creator provides the structural support from above, while the people on the ground provide the ritual energy to sustain it. While the creator god remains passive, the weather is governed by active, visible deities. Chief among them is Horrigalis, the god of thunder. He uses a double hammer to create storms, and wields the rainbow as a celestial bow to hunt down malevolent spirits hiding in the mountains. Horrigalis brings protection through violence, but the true lifeblood of the Arctic is Bavi, the sun goddess. As the mother of humankind, she provides the radiant energy that allows plants to grow and animals to thrive in the freezing tundra. In the high Arctic, the sun is not a constant. During the winter solstice, the region is plunged into absolute darkness for months. Without Bavi's light, the cold becomes absolute, and the psychological toll on the community grows heavy. To ensure her return, the Sami historically sacrificed snowy white reindeer to her. These animals were sacred symbols of light, offered to coax the sun back over the horizon and break the long, dark winter. These deities represent the environmental vulnerabilities of the North. The fear of freezing darkness and the hope for warmth are projected directly onto the sky, where these gods personify the forces that dictate Sami survival. While sky gods govern the macrocosm, the focus shifts to the intimate interior of the traditional Sami tent, the gati. Inside this communal space, daily life is governed by a group of protective goddesses. There is a division of labor between the heavens and the hearth. Radian Atye creates a human soul in the upper world, but he hands it down to the Akkas, the divine matriarchs, to craft its physical body. Sarakaka lives directly within the central fire of the home. She is responsible for shaping the child's flesh and protecting women through menstruation and childbirth. Her sisters manage other aspects of survival. Juksaka, the bow woman, determines the child's gender, while Uksaka guards the threshold of the tent, watching over infants and blocking evil spirits from entering the home. In the Arctic, the most critical elements of life, shelter, warmth, and reproduction, are governed by goddesses who live within the family's immediate circle. Bridging the gap between the deities of the sky and the spirits of the hearth is the Noaidi, the Sami shaman. They act as the sole human protector, capable of crossing the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds. To make that crossing, the Noaidi uses a maverskari, a sacred oval frame drum made of reindeer hide. This drumhead is painted with symbols in red alder bark juice. These markings serve as a literal, navigable map of the tripartite cosmos, identifying the locations of gods, ancestors, and animals. The drum serves as an essential tool for survival. It allows the Noaidi to calculate the will of the gods, predict the fortune of the hunt, and chart a safe path through the unseen layers of the universe. To use the drum, the Noaidi strikes the hide with a specialized hammer. As the rhythm accelerates into a steady, hypnotic pulse, the shaman enters an ecstatic trance, allowing their consciousness to step beyond the physical mind. During this trance, the shaman's physical body remains stationary, while their free spirit detaches. This spirit is then free to travel across the astral plane to other worlds. Because the spirit world is vast and dangerous, the Noaidi often takes a reindeer form to cross the ethereal tundra. This shapeshifting allows the shaman to travel with the speed and endurance necessary to reach the high gods or the deep underworld. These journeys have practical goals. The Noaidi travels to negotiate for better weather, to battle rival shamans, or to retrieve the souls of the sick from the realm of the dead. The Sami cosmos is a world of constant movement and necessary sacrifice. It is a vast architecture where humans do not simply watch the gods from below, but actively work through ritual and shamanic travel to maintain the balance of their universe.
To an outsider, the Arctic tundra in winter is a desolate, lifeless void. Sami tradition stacks existence into three distinct vertical layers: an upper world for celestial deities, a lower world for spirits, and the earthly plane in the middle. Humans occupy this middle world, sharing this exact space with physical, unseen threats stalking the immediate wilderness. Surviving in Sapmi requires navigating this spatial map. The cold and the wind are dangerous, but the entities occupying the spaces beside and below humanity are actively hunting you. The most immediate threat in this metal world is the Stallo, towering, cannibalistic giants clad entirely in iron armor. They wander the winter darkness accompanied by eerie convoys of mice.
But while a stalo possesses terrifying brute strength, they are known for animal cunning rather than human intelligence. Traditional Sami folktales rarely feature heroes winning through direct combat. Instead, smaller, agile Sami protagonists survive by tricking the stalo, leading them out onto thin ice or trapping them in their own snares. As the centuries passed, the stalo began to resemble the foreign powers pushing into the Arctic. The giant's brute force and low intelligence became a caricature of ruthless tax collectors and missionaries who couldn't understand the land they were trying to rule. By outsmarting these giants in folklore, the Sami were rehearsing a strategy for their own cultural survival. These tales kept children safe by the fire, while giving a vulnerable people a way to symbolically overcome the forces occupying their world. The ground beneath the tundra holds its own hazards. Dotted across the landscape are saivu, pure glacial lakes believed to have double bottoms, functioning as trapdoors. When the fish vanish, the Sami believe they breach that false floor, dropping into an upside-down parallel dimension where the deceased live in abundance. This realm is populated by the Oldot, impossibly beautiful, wealthy people who herd magnificent spotted and albino reindeer. But the Oldot conceal a physical mutation. They have animal tails hidden beneath their clothing, and they frequently breach the surface lakes to seduce human men and drag them below. They also prey on human families, slipping into Sami camps to steal healthy human infants and replace them with their own sick or deformed babies known as changelings. Defending against them required strict rules. Parents pinned silver jewelry to their babies' clothes to ward off theft. If a hunter spotted an Oldot reindeer herd, they had to throw a steel knife over the animals to claim them. The Oldot embody a harsh Arctic truth. The most beautiful aspects of the natural world are highly deceptive, and interaction with them carries extreme predatory risks. Pushing deeper into the fringes of this mythic map, the geography becomes visceral. The boundary separating the human realm from the ancient lands is the River of Blood. The rolling waves of this river are made of lungs. The heavy, slippery stones resting beneath the current are dense blocks of liver. Living just beyond this biological border is Miandash, a shape-shifting reindeer man. Born to a human woman, Miandash operates as a culture hero who taught the Sami the rules of hunting and herding, mediating the relationship between humanity and the wild. This biological border reflects exactly how the Sami view their existence. Their physical survival in the Arctic is inextricably bound to the actual flesh, blood, and life cycle of the reindeer. Far below the Oldot and the River of Blood lies Rotaimo, the absolute bottom layer of the cosmos, a pitch-black realm of cold and mist. Rotaimo is a final destination reserved exclusively for those who lived against the natural order of the community. The supreme entity of this deep underworld is Ruta, the god of sickness and death. Sami iconography depicts Rota in a way that separates him from every other figure in their cosmos. He does not ride a reindeer, he rides a horse. Horses were not indigenous to the Sami. They were the primary mode of transportation for Norse and Swedish neighbors, invading from the south. To the Sami, the silhouette of a horse meant the arrival of violent conquest, forced assimilation, and the devastating waves of foreign disease. Rota is the manifestation of imported doom. This mythology is an encoded historical record of trauma and resistance, outlining the ultimate rules for surviving the terrors of the unseen world.
Many cultures look to the heavens to find their gods. We imagine Zeus or Thor ruling from the clouds, hurling lightning onto the world below. But the ancient Basques looked down. In their cosmos, the sky, known as Ortsi, holds no authority. It is an empty hallway, a corridor for the sun and moon to pass through, but devoid of divine power. The center of reality sits beneath the surface. Amalura, or Mother Earth, is the supreme creator, an infinite subterranean shelter for all living creatures and the souls of the dead. This creates a unique tension. If the heavens are vacant, then the forces of nature and the laws of morality must be governed from the rock and the dark.
To understand this world, we have to follow the path of the ancient Basques and physically descend into the depths of the earth. This photograph of Mount Amboto shows the threshold of the gods, where rocky peaks vanish into the storm clouds. Deep within these mountains, Mari resides in golden subterranean palaces. She is the absolute center of the Basque pantheon, ruling over all other spirits. This illustration captures Mari as the personification of nature, appearing as an elegant woman in a green, mossy dress. She is a shapeshifter, manifesting as a white cloud, a vulture, or a sickle of fire crossing the sky. Mari enforces a strict ethical code. She acts as a judge, reacting firmly against arrogance, thievery, and lying. Her justice is mechanical. She claims what is denied. This diagram shows the principle of ezigas et abayagas. If a farmer claims to have 6 apples, but hides 4 others, Mari simply takes the hidden surplus for herself. This makes the earth an active participant in human society, a watchful enforcer of honesty and communal integrity. Moving past the cave mouth and into the dark limestone interior, we search for the source of the region's violent weather. Here we find Sugar, Mari's consort. He is a giant subterranean serpent, or dragon, who embodies the raw power of the deep earth. On Friday nights, Mari and Sugar meet in these caverns. Their union produces the region's most devastating weather. In the Basque worldview, storms do not fall from the sky. As this video shows, lightning and storm clouds originate underground, erupting upward from deep chasms to fill the air. Within this turbulent environment, Mari and Sugar forged their twin sons, Atarabi and Mikelats. The twins personify nature's duality. Atarabin represents constructive goodness, while Mikelats brings the violent storms that destroy crops and flocks. Both the balance of the seasons and the chaos of the storm rise from the same subterranean source. They are inseparable parts of the natural world. At the base of the Basque cosmos, we discover the origin of light itself. This cross-section maps the structure of the universe. The sun, Eguski, and the moon, Ilargi, are the daughters of Ama Lura. Every day, they emerge from the earth in the east, travel across the sky corridor, and sink back into their subterranean womb every night. In this system, celestial light is a temporary gift. It is something birthed by the dark earth, rather than a permanent fixture of the heavens. At night, when the sun returns to the earth, the surface world becomes vulnerable to the spirits of the darkness. To protect her human children, Ama Lura created the Egusgilore, or silver thistle. Nailed to the door of a farmhouse, the silver thistle acts as a proxy for the sun. Its shape mimics the light, tricking spirits and warding off evil while the daughters of the earth rest. This mythology rejects the idea of escaping the physical world for a celestial paradise. The Basque cosmos is a grounded reverence for the earth, a reminder that justice, protection, and life itself spring from the soil beneath our feet. Because their gods were literally the ground they walked upon, Basque culture evolved through a lens of ecological negotiation. They saw the wilderness as a territory shared with powerful neighbors, rather than a resource to be dominated. The deep forests belonged to the Basayan, a shaggy, human-shaped giant. He acted as a vital cultural mentor to early humanity, sharing the technical secrets of agriculture and ironworking that allowed the first Basque communities to take root. Near the mountain springs lived the Lamiak, beautiful water nymphs characterized by their bird-like feet. They held the power to grant prosperity to those who approached with respect, or trigger ruinous curses for the greedy and dishonest. Further up, past the tree line, the landscape became the domain of far more imposing ancient forces. These high summits were home to the Gentilok giants, who threw massive boulders across the valleys, alongside the one-eyed Tartalo and the seven-headed dragon Herensuga. Early humans navigated this terrifying ecosystem through constant dialogue with these untamed guardians. Survival depended on maintaining a balanced relationship with a nature that was both provider and predator. This balance was maintained through Adar, a magical force that inextricably linked a physical object or name to its real-world counterpart. To the Basque mind, Manipulating the image of a thing had an immediate physical impact on the thing itself. The primary practitioners of this system were the Sorginak. These women served their communities as revered herbalists and midwives, acting as the human bridge to the earth's subterranean power. They gathered in rituals known as Akalareak, communal events designed to honor the seasonal shifts of the earth and ensure the continued health of their livestock and crops. In this context, magic functioned as a pragmatic social tool. It was the technical language used to sustain the community and its connection to the land. This internal logic was shattered by the arrival of the Spanish and French Inquisitions. They brought a rigid, celestial-focused hierarchy into the mountain valleys for the first time. The collision was absolute. A patriarchal, sky faith occupied the space of an ancient earth worship system. To gain control, the Inquisition systematically rebranded the culture. Akelaraic gatherings were redefined as satanic Sabbaths, teaching neighbors to fear their traditions. The most devastating example of this campaign occurred in the village of Zugarramurdi in 1610. Following brutal interrogations, the Inquisition executed dozens of healers and elders. They were burned at the stake, violently breaking the chain of traditional knowledge. The trials functioned as a deliberate political tool. By associating the community's relationship with the land with the concept of the devil, the Inquisition effectively stripped the Basque people of their traditional social autonomy. Despite the violence, the Inquisition failed to erase the underlying culture. The myths found safety in the inaccessible limestone peaks and the isolated structure of Euskera, a language that provided a natural shield against outside ideologies. The Old World moved into the architecture itself. The Laubaru, a four-headed cross, became a permanent fixture on stone lintels, embedding the ancient concept of natural harmony into people's homes. Farmhouses also retained the Eguskilore thistle. Pinned to front doors, this flower of the sun continues to serve its ancient purpose, protecting the household from the very spirits the Inquisition tried to define as demons. Basque earth worship survived by adapting. It solidified into the land, becoming part of the physical fabric of every village and valley. Today, this ancient magic surfaces every year during the winter carnivals. The Joaldunak emerge from the winter mist, wearing heavy sheepskins and towering hats, their faces set in a focused, rhythmic trance. They carry massive brass cowbells, swinging them in a precise, percussive unison designed to physically reawaken the earth and clear the air of malevolent forces. These rituals represent a living continuity. The rhythmic intent remains the same today as it was before the first empire ever stepped foot in these mountains. The survival of Basque mythology serves as a permanent testament to a culture that refused to let its connection to the earth be severed, ensuring that their ancient world remains alive and breathing in the 21st century.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy mythology, be sure to check out our other videos, and if you would like us to cover a specific culture's myths, just let us know in the comments. And remember, you are awesome.
The Aztec universe was inherently precarious. According to their theology, the cosmos was a fragile construction, living under a constant, looming threat of collapse. Their world was not a permanent creation, but rather the fifth attempt at a functional universe. This massive carving, the Sunstone, records that history of failure. 4 square panels around the center represent the previous eras and their cataclysms, devoured by giant jaguars, swept away by hurricanes, incinerated by rains of fire, and finally drowned in a 52-year deluge. This cyclical history of annihilation defined the Aztec consciousness. They understood that their current world, the fifth sun, existed on a knife's edge. Without active, constant intervention, the universe would inevitably return to chaos. That intervention was born in the darkness of Teotihuacan. After the fourth flood receded, the gods gathered in these ruins to determine who would bring light back to a black world.
A humble, sickly god named Nanahuatzin stepped forward and cast his physical body into a massive, roaring bonfire. he sacrificed his form to emerge from the flames as Tonatiuh, the radiant new sun. But the creation was incomplete. The new sun hung frozen in the sky, refusing to move and demanding the remaining gods sacrifice their own blood to set the cosmos in motion. The remaining deities complied, giving up their lives to provide the initial energy for the world to turn. This act established the ultimate law of the Aztec universe. The gods had to die so humanity could live. This primordial event forged a binding cosmic contract, a blood debt where the continuation of life must be perpetually paid for with life. The Aztec gods acted as the mechanical maintainers of this fragile system, aggressive creditors who demanded repayment for their initial sacrifice. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent of wind and wisdom, brought civilization and the calendar to mankind, but his narrative emphasizes a strict balance required for life to continue. Tlaloc, the terrifying god of rain, sustained the maize crops with water, but he was a ruthless creditor who demanded payment in blood and the tears of the young. Huitzilopochtli, the patron god of war and the sun, required daily nourishment to fuel his struggle against the forces of darkness and ensure the sun rose every morning. This was a transactional universe. These deities would allow the cosmos to collapse the moment humanity defaulted on its payments. Since the gods died to create the world, humanity inherited the terrifying burden of providing the fuel to keep it in motion. The relentless warfare of the empire served this specific cosmic obligation. The Flowery Wars were sacred missions designed to capture high-status warriors as the required currency for the gods. Warm blood and living hearts were the literal currency needed to keep the cosmos turning. These sacrifices served as a grim, heroic necessity to stave off the skeletal star demons waiting in the dark to devour the earth. This immense cosmic pressure centered on a single night every 52 years. When the two primary calendars aligned, the contract reached its expiration date and was up for renewal. The empire fell into a state of paralysis. Every fire was extinguished. Pregnant women were locked in granaries, and children were kept awake, fearing that if the ritual failed, the utter darkness would transform them into monsters. On this isolated stone platform, high priests sacrificed a single warrior and attempted to kindle a new fire inside his empty chest cavity. As the new fire spread from that mountain to the rest of the empire, it affirmed their identity as the people of the sun, the guardians bearing the tragic, terrifying responsibility of keeping the universe alive.
In most modern religions, your afterlife is a report card. If you live a good life, you go to heaven. If you're wicked, you face eternal punishment. But for the Aztecs, the gods didn't care about your morals. Your kindness, your cruelty, your daily actions, none of it mattered once you took your last breath. Instead, your eternal destination was determined entirely by the exact physical circumstances of your death. How you died provided the absolute coordinates for where your soul would be sent. To understand this system, look at the geography of the Aztec cosmos. It was a vast vertical axis. Above, there were 13 layers of heavens. Below, 9 descending layers of the underworld. Suspended in the exact center was the fragile plane of human existence, Earth. At death, you triggered a mandatory migration, traveling either up to the canopy or down into the abyss. This meant every Aztec citizen walked life with a heavy realization. Their eternal fate rested entirely on the unpredictable, uncontrollable events of their final moments on Earth. Let's follow an ordinary person. Imagine an average Aztec farmer or weaver who reaches the end of a long life and passes away quietly in their sleep, or succumbs to a common illness. A quiet, peaceful death meant the gods of the upper realms hadn't claimed them. Instead, gravity took hold. Their soul was pulled downward into the dark expanse of Mictlan. The journey began with a definitive separation. The life force detached from the physical corpse, leaving the warmth and light of the earthly boundary behind to step into the shadows. For the vast majority of the population, death offered no peaceful rest. It was the starting gun for a brutal, relentless 4-year survival trek through the underworld. The first major barrier facing our traveler was the Appenwaya River. This was an impossibly wide, violent torrent of water,
churning too fast for any human spirit to swim across alone. The only way across was to ride on the back of a Xolo Itzcuintli, a sacred hairless dog. Families would specifically cremate one of these reddish dogs alongside the deceased, so its spirit could serve as a cosmic ferryman through the rapids. Once across the water, the soul faced a terrifying mountain pass. But these weren't stationary peaks. The traveler had to time a desperate sprint between two colossal mountains, trapped in a cycle of violently colliding, threatening to crush anything caught inside. Surviving that, they entered a dark, frozen wasteland. Here, the sub-zero winds blew so fiercely that they carried razor-sharp shards of black obsidian, slicing directly into the traversing souls. These horrific trials served a specific mechanical function. They were not retributive punishments for earthly sins. The underworld was a processor, designed to violently strip away the soul's remaining flesh, earthly belongings, and lingering memories of the living world. As our ordinary soul endures the freezing dark, we can pause to look upward. A lucky minority completely bypassed the tortures of Mictlan. If a person drowned or was struck by lightning, they were personally claimed by Tlaloc, the rain god.
They were instantly transported to Tlalocan, a lush, effortless paradise defined by eternal spring and an endless abundance of food. Then there was the highest cosmic honor, the House of the Sun. This bright, soaring heaven was reserved exclusively for warriors killed in combat and the enemy captives offered to the gods on the sacrificial altars. These fallen fighters were granted the glorious duty of escorting the sun across the morning sky. After 4 years of this celestial parade, they returned to the earthly plane, reincarnated as hummingbirds or brightly colored butterflies. The Aztecs also enforced a profound cultural equalizer. Women who died in childbirth were viewed as having fallen in a sacred, bloody battle. They were elevated to the exact same elite cosmic status as the greatest male warriors, tasked with escorting the sun down into the western sky each evening. In the Aztec mind, violent and exceptional deaths were sacred victories for the state. They rewarded the victims with glorious heavenly duties, while the ordinary citizens were left to suffer in the dark. We snap back to our ordinary soul. 4 grueling years have passed, and they have finally dragged themselves to the 8th level of the underworld. Here, they faced the ultimate violation. A terrifying jaguar emerged from the shadows, leaping forward to devour the soul's heart. The heart housed the teolia, the vital essence containing a person's life force, their knowledge, and their core identity. Once the jaguar consumed the heart, the soul was no longer human. The individual ego was permanently dissolved, stripping away the very last traces of who they used to be. They were finally ready for the abyss. The fragmented soul finally drifted down into Chikuna Mictlan, the 9th and deepest level of the underworld. Here, they stood before the ruler of the realm. This was Mictlan Tecuhtli, the skeletal lord of death. With his exposed ribs and grinning skull, he oversaw the final stage of the soul's journey. At the end of the 4-year trek, there is no eternal torture or divine reward. There is only total extinction, where the soul completely decomposes and returns to the void. This erasure was the fulfillment of a natural debt, a necessary breakdown that returned the human essence back to the earth that had once sustained it. The Aztec afterlife functioned as an active thermodynamic ecosystem designed to keep the living world intact. According to their foundational myth, the gods sacrificed their own blood to set the universe in motion. Because of that initial transaction, humanity owed an eternal blood debt to prevent the cosmos from collapsing. The elegance of the Aztec cosmos was highly functional. Ordinary deaths decomposed to feed the soil of the earth. Drowned victims were absorbed into the sky to power the water cycle,
to fuel the daily motion of the sun. In the Aztec worldview, death functioned as a mandatory transition into a new cosmic labor, the beginning of a long shift to keep the universe in motion.
The 7 cantrefs of Dyfed are a realm of ancient prosperity, ruled from the palace at Arbeth. Its prince, Pwyll, is a man of wealth and momentum, though his decisions are often guided by the impulse of the moment. During a hunting expedition into the deep, misty forests of Glyn Cwch, Pwyll pursues the chase with such intensity that he outpaces his royal retinue, finding himself isolated in the thick of the woods. He discovers a pack of hounds unlike any in his kennels, pure white with vibrant red ears, tearing into a fallen stag. Pwyll impulsively drives the strange dogs away, setting his own pack upon the kill to claim it for himself. This theft is an offense against a power Pwyll does not yet understand. These hounds belong to Around, the king of the otherworld realm of Anwen. Around appears from the mist to confront the prince. He does not demand gold for the insult, but a perilous year-long service to balance the scales of justice between their two worlds. The survival of Dyfed now rests on Pwyll's ability to survive the lethal and unfamiliar politics of the immortal realm. The pact is absolute. For 1 year, Pwyll and Aran exchange bodies, duties, and kingdoms. Pwyll descends into the otherworld in the king's guise. He must rule a court of immortals and manage a supernatural state without revealing his true human identity. His discipline is tested nightly in the royal bedchamber. Though he shares a bed with Aran's queen, he turns his back to her every night for a year, upholding his vow of chastity through silence and restraint. The year concludes at a river ford, where Pwyll is required to duel Aran's immortal rival, Hofgen. Success depends on a strict magical law. Pwyll must strike only 1 blow. To strike a second time, even to finish a wounded enemy, would revive Hofgen and break the enchantment. Pwyll delivers a single decisive strike that shatters Hofgen's armor. Despite his opponent's pleas for a finishing blow, Pwyll lowers his sword, proving he has mastered the restraint he once lacked. Upon returning to Dyfed, Pwyll finds his own land has flourished under Erin's just rule. For his conduct in the otherworld, he is granted a new title, Pen and One, Head of the Otherworld. Pwyll returns to his throne as a ruler of proven discipline. It is this reputation for justice that now draws the attention of Fursets waiting just beyond the edges of the mortal world. Pwyll holds court at Gorset Arbeth, a sacred mound where tradition holds that any man who sits upon it will witness a wonder or receive a grievous wound. A woman appears on the horizon, dressed in shining gold brocade and riding a pale white horse that seems to move at a slow, rhythmic pace. Pwyll's fastest riders give chase, but the woman remains at a constant, impossible distance. No matter how much they gallop, the slow-walking horse stays ahead of them, defying the logic of the terrain. Pwyll eventually realizes that speed cannot solve the riddle. He rides out and speaks to her with simple courtesy, asking her to stop. She complies immediately, revealing herself as Rhiannon. They marry a year later, a union that joins the throne of Dyfed to the ancient and potent lineage of the otherworld. The birth of a son and heir follows, but on the eve of a great festival, the child vanishes from his cradle in the dead of night while his attendants sleep. The child's disappearance brings a monstrous reckoning to the palace, threatening to collapse the royal house at its moment of greatest triumph. A monstrous scaled claw reaches through the heavy window frame of the royal nursery, snatching the newborn prince while his guards sleep. The terrified maids, fearing punishment for their failure, smear the blood of puppies on the sleeping Rhiannon. They falsely accuse the queen of killing and eating her own child to hide the truth of the abduction. As ruler, Pwyll is forced to apply the law. Though he loves his queen, he cannot ignore the gruesome evidence presented to the court, leading him to impose a public and humiliating penance. For 7 years, Rhiannon is forced to sit by the mounting block of the castle gate. She must tell her story to every arriving stranger, offering to carry them into the court on her back like a beast of burden. The kingdom of Dyfed falls into a period of mourning and stagnation, its legacy seemingly broken by the loss of the heir and the shaming of the queen. Miles away, on the same night the prince was taken, the nobleman Ternan keeps watch over his stables during a foaling. A mysterious beast reaches into the stable to steal a newborn foal. Ternan severs the monster's arm with a heavy sword before it escapes. Outside the stable, Ternan discovers an abandoned infant. He adopts the boy, who displays a supernatural rate of growth, reaching the physical size of a 4-year-old within only a few years. Recognizing the child's royal features, Ternan realizes the boy's true identity. He travels to Arbeth to return the golden-haired child to the court of Pwyll and Rhiannon. Rhiannon is instantly exonerated. She names the boy Pryderi, meaning loss or care, bringing an end to the years of her public humiliation. The trials of the royal house conclude with a lineage strengthened by its endurance. Through a year in the otherworld and the long years of penance, the rulers of Dyfed established a foundation of justice that would define the kingdom for an age. Beneath the Tower of London lies an ancient mound, the White Hill. Mythology claims a powerful artifact was buried in its foundations to protect the island. That artifact is the severed head of Bendigeidfran, a giant British king, positioned toward France to ward off enemies. Before that head ended up under London, Bendigeidfran ruled over a prosperous golden age. The island was secure, separated from the rest of the world by a vast rocky coastline. The foundation of this defense grew from the ruins of a war that destroyed 2 nations. The collapse began with a treaty. To secure peace across the sea, King Bendigeidfran arranged a diplomatic marriage between his sister, Branwen, and the King of Ireland, Matholwch. The alliance barely lasted through the wedding. Branwen's half-brother, Efnisien, felt deeply insulted. Enraged that he wasn't consulted on the marriage, he lashed out. In a single night, he cornered the Irish king's prized horses and mutilated them. Realizing the insult was an act of war, Bendigeidfran scrambled to pay an enormous blood price. He replaced the horses, offered gold, and handed over a terrifying artifact. He gave the Irish the Cauldron of Rebirth, a magical vessel capable of bringing dead warriors back to life, though they would return unable to speak. Using dark magic to patch over a violent insult did not resolve the tension. It armed a resentful neighbor for a conflict that was now inevitable. 2 years into the marriage, the Irish court's lingering bitterness over the horses boiled over. The king caved to political pressure, stripped Branwen of her crown, and banished her from the royal quarters. She was sent to work in the kitchens. Every day, the royal butcher was ordered to strike her across the face, a daily physical punishment meant to answer for her brother's crime. Trapped and isolated, Branwen spent months secretly rearing a starling. She taught the bird to recognize her brother's ships and sent it across the Irish Sea with a message detailing her abuse. When the bird reached Bendigeidfran, he mobilized the British military. His frame was so colossal that no ship could carry him, forcing the giant king to wade through the ocean alongside his navy. Seeing the giant approach the coast, the Irish forces fell back. They retreated across the Shannon River, destroying the bridges to block the British advance. With his army stalled at the water's edge, Bendigeidfran lay his massive body down across the riverbed. He told his men that any leader must be a bridge, and he allowed his troops to march directly over his back. Branwen quietly endured years of physical torment to preserve the peace, while her colossal brother offered himself as a stepping stone. Yet the entire conflict was manufactured by the pride of a single man back home. Facing annihilation, the Irish sued for a false peace. They offered to build a colossal house, the first structure large enough to fit the giant British king, under the pretense of hosting a surrender feast. Inside the Great Hall, they hung dozens of heavy flour sacks from the structural pillars. Inside each sack was a fully armed Irish assassin waiting for the signal to strike. But Efnisien suspected a trap. Before the feast began, he walked the perimeter of the hall, inspecting the sacks, and crushed the skulls of all 200 hidden warriors. Both armies then sat down to eat. The hall was thick with the silent realization of what happened in the shadows, yet the leaders pushed forward to finalize the treaty. Then Efnisien snapped. Without warning, he grabbed Branwen's young son, the newly named heir to the Irish throne, and threw the boy into the roaring hearth. That single murder eradicated any remaining diplomatic pretense. The peace treaty vanished in the flames, and a political dispute transformed into an apocalyptic war of extermination. The doors mocked. Inside the claustrophobic confines of the colossal hall, a brutal melee erupted between the two trapped armies. The Irish immediately deployed their tactical advantage. They brought out the cauldron of rebirth, tossing their slaughtered soldiers inside and pulling them out as mute, relentless undead fighters. This diagram illustrates the grim mathematics of the battle. While the British forces steadily deplete from casualties, the Irish numbers cyclically drain and refill as their dead are continuously resurrected. Watching the massacre he initiated, Efnisien made a desperate attempt at redemption. He disguised himself among the Irish corpses and allowed himself to be thrown into the cauldron. Once inside, he pushed against the enchanted iron walls, stretching his body until the vessel shattered from the inside out, killing him instantly. The destruction of the cauldron ended the resurrection of the dead, but the war had already crossed a threshold where the initial insult was lost in the scale of the atrocity. By the time the fighting finally stopped, the casualties were absolute. The entire population of Ireland was nearly wiped out, and out of a massive invasion force, exactly 7 British soldiers survived. The 7 survivors boarded a ship with a rescued Bronwyn and a dying King Bendigeid Fan. They eventually made landfall beneath the stone cliffs of Harlech. Standing on the shore, Bronwyn looked back toward Ireland and then over Britain. The weight of the catastrophe was so profound that she collapsed and died upon looking at the ruined nations. Her brother followed shortly after. Bleeding from a poisoned spear, the giant king issued a final strategic order. His remaining men were to sever his head from his body. For the next 80 years, those 7 soldiers lived in a state of suspended time. They sat at a surreal feast where their king's living head spoke to them, providing comfort against the memory of the slaughter. Once the feast ended, the survivors fulfilled their final duty. They carried the head to London and buried it beneath the White Hill, leaving the island's ultimate defense to stand as a monument to the war that left them as its only witnesses.
The campaigns in Ireland have ended, leaving only a handful of survivors returning to the shores of Dyfed to rebuild in a fragile peace. Among them is Mabinogion. Though he is the rightful heir to the British throne, he declines to fight for his crown. Instead, he marries the widowed Rhiannon, establishing a joint rule alongside her son Pryderi and his wife Cegfa. Under their combined stewardship, the realm sees a period of unusual calm. The harvests are bountiful, and a steady prosperity settles over the cantrefs of Dyfed. This stability is the result of a conscious choice to lay down the sword. Manawydan's commitment to peace is absolute, and it is about to face a test that steel cannot resolve. While the 4 royals sit upon the ancient mound of Gorsedd Arbreth, the kingdom's silence is shattered by a deafening thunderclap. Immediately, a thick, magical mist rolls across the landscape. It is impenetrable and heavy, completely blocking out the sun. When the mist finally clears, Dyfed is empty. The people, the livestock, and the surrounding settlements have all vanished. Only the 4 royals remain. They are stranded in a vacuum, left entirely alone in a landscape that has become a silent ruin. Against an invisible force that can steal a nation without a drop of blood, the traditional instincts of a warrior find no target. Forced into exile in the neighboring lands of England, Manawydan refuses to rally a mercenary army or seek violent vengeance. He turns instead to survival through labor. He teaches his family to work leather, manufacturing saddles, shields, and fine shoes with meticulous detail. Their craftsmanship is so superior that the local guilds are driven to a jealous fury, eventually directing threats of murder at the displaced royals. The young Pryderi wants to draw his sword and meet the mobs in the street, but Manawydan commands a retreat. He chooses the path of restraint, leading them back to the ruins of Dyfed. Manawydan treats survival not as a series of impulsive battles, but as a craftsman's long, methodical labor. Back in the wasteland of their homeland, the royal family's discipline fractures. While hunting, Pryderi and Rhiannon break formation to chase a spectral white boar. The pursuit lures them directly into the courtyard of a massive fortress that has appeared out of the mist. Inside, Pryderi touches a mysterious golden bowl and is instantly struck mute and paralyzed. When Rhiannon attempts to pull him free, she is caught in the same magical grip. The fortress then vanishes, taking the two royals with it. Manawydan is left alone with only Pryderi's wife, Sigva. The trap worked because it relied on the heroic instinct. Charging headlong into the unknown was the exact behavior the enemy anticipated. Facing the loss of his family and his kingdom, Manawydan turns his attention to the dirt. He ignores the magic and methodically plants 3 fields of wheat. Just as the harvest ripens, an enormous horde of mice devours his crops overnight, stripping the fields to the ground. Manawydan does not panic. He watches the swarms and captures a single, unusually slow mouse that failed to escape the final field. He drives 2 sticks into the earth and constructs a miniature gallows, intending to formally execute the mouse as a thief. This absurd protocol is a psychological snare. By treating a magical pest with the rigid dignity of the law, Manawydan forces the hidden enemy into the light. The sight of a ruler preparing to hang a mouse breaks the enemy's resolve. A sequence of strangers appear pleading for the mouse's life, ending with a bishop's arrival. The bishop reveals his true identity. He is the sorcerer Wit Apkilcoid. He confesses that the mouse is his own shapeshifted wife, and the other mice were his ladies of the court. The motive is finally revealed. The devastation of Dyfed was a long, simmering revenge for an insult committed decades ago by Pryderi's father. With the sorcerer's wife in his hand, Manawydan sets his terms. He rejects the sword, and instead uses his position to negotiate an unbreakable, legally binding oath. He demands the safe return of Pryderi and Rhiannon, the restoration of the people of Dyfed, and a permanent ban on magic ever striking his lands again. In an era of warlords and bloodletting, the total restoration of Dyfed was achieved through a craftsman's patience and a perfectly tied knot.
In the rugged peaks and deep valleys of northern Wales lies the ancient kingdom of Gwynedd. This was a land governed by old primordial magic. At its center ruled King Math, a sorcerer king bound by a bizarre condition of sovereignty. When he was not actively at war, Math could only survive if he kept his feet resting in the lap of a virgin. This requirement meant the stability of the entire realm hung by a thread. The peace of Gwynedd relied entirely on the purity and presence of one specific maiden, leaving the kingdom exposed to the slightest internal disruption. That disruption came from within the king's own family. Math's nephew, the master enchanter Gwydion, discovered that his brother Gylfathwy had developed a consuming obsession with Gowyn, the king's designated footholder. To satisfy this illicit desire, the brothers needed to separate the king from his protector. They would use their magic to engineer a massive geopolitical crisis, turning a private transgression into a devastating war. Gwydion devised a plan to draw King Math's armies far away from the royal fortress in the north. Traveling south to the kingdom of Dyfed, he used his sorcery to conjure grand illusions of priceless horses and hounds. He traded these phantoms to a rival lord in exchange for a herd of otherworldly pigs, knowing the theft would ignite an immediate bloody invasion. The deception worked. As Math marched his troops south to fight this fabricated war, Gylfathwy assaulted Gowyn, breaking the king's sovereign magic and stripping her of her honor. When Math returned victorious and discovered the violation, his retaliation was swift and merciless. He struck his nephews with his magic wand, stripping Gwydion and Gylfathwy of their human forms entirely. He condemned them to live as wild animals, first as deer, then wild boars, and finally wolves. For 3 agonizing years, they were forced to mate with each other and their offspring in the wilderness. Gwydion's attempt to manipulate reality had left the dynasty humiliated and vulnerable. Upon earning the king's forgiveness, the enchanter was tasked with repairing the very royal lineage he had nearly destroyed. The court desperately needed a new virgin footholder to maintain Math's sovereignty, as well as a legitimate heir to secure the kingdom's future. Gwydion presented his own sister, Arianrhod, for the role. To prove her purity, Math required her to undergo a magical test by stepping over his enchanted wooden wand.
As Arianrhod stepped across the wand, the magic forced her hidden pregnancy to light, and she instantly dropped an infant boy onto the floor in front of the entire court. Exposed and furious, Arianrhod lashed out at the child. She cast 3 severe curses to deny him his birthright. He would never have a name, he would never bear weapons, and he would never take a human wife. These specific conditions were designed to freeze the boy out of noble society. Without a name, he had no identity. Without arms, he could not defend the realm. Without a wife, he could never produce an heir. The child's life became a proxy war. Every step of his growth would be a direct clash between Arianrhod's inescapable decrees and Gwydion's relentless drive to put his nephew on the throne. Gwydion systematically dismantled the first 2 curses. Using elaborate shape-shifting illusions, he tricked Arianrhod into observing the boys strike a bird, prompting her to accidentally grant him the name Lo Laugifus. Later, a fabricated military attack panicked her into personally handing the boy a sword and shield. The final curse posed a far greater challenge. Arianrhod had explicitly forbidden Lo from marrying a woman of human lineage, which meant the boy could not establish a royal bloodline. Math and Gwydion bypassed their restriction by pooling their deep sorcery. Gathering the blossoms of oak, broom, and meadowsweet, they wove the plant matter together to construct a living woman. They named her Blodeuwedd, meaning flower face. By wedding Lo to this botanical creation, they bypassed Arianrhod's final prohibition and secured the boy's path to power. Yet this victory was entirely synthetic. A reign held together by forced destinies, illusions, and artificially engineered life carried an extreme level of volatility. That volatility surfaced as Blodeuwedd developed her own consciousness and desires. While Leyu was away, she encountered a passing lord named Gronwu and fell deeply in love with him. Together, they conspired to eliminate Leyu. Because his life was heavily protected by magic, Blodeuwedd used his trust to coax out the highly specific conditions under which he could be killed. The vulnerability was a bizarre paradox. Leyu could not be slain indoors or outdoors, on horseback or on foot. He could only die by a spear forged exclusively during Sunday Mass, over the course of a full year. After a year of secret preparation, Blodeuwedd convinced Leyu to demonstrate this impossible posture. Standing with one foot on a bath edge under a thatched roof, and the other on a goat, the trap sprang shut, and Gronwu struck him with the cursed spear. The blow did not kill him. Instead, the magic protecting Leyu reacted violently to the trauma. He transformed into an eagle, letting out a terrible screech as he fled into the wilderness. Gwydion's supreme act of sorcery had backfired. By manufacturing a bride to bypass destiny, he engineered the exact weapon that struck down his king. The attempt to perfectly control nature had invited a violent correction. Gwydion tracked his nephew across the unforgiving terrain of northern Wales. Following the trail of a scavenging sow, he finally located the rotting eagle perched high in an oak tree, shedding its flush. The enchanter began a shamanic ritual, singing a series of ancient poems to slowly coax the ruined bird down through the branches until he could strike it with his wand and restore Lu to human form. Once healed, the king demanded strict retribution. He tracked down Gronwu and, channeling his own supernatural strength, hurled a spear completely through a solid stone slab to execute the man who had tried to usurp him. Gwydion saved his final act of vengeance for his own creation. He hunted down Blodeuwedd and cursed her, stripping away her beautiful human shape and condemning her to live forever in the darkness as a hunted, solitary owl. The master enchanter had achieved his goal. He had bent reality, broken destiny, and placed his bloodline on the throne of Gwynedd. But this reign was forged in betrayal and trauma, proving that magic, no matter how powerful, demands an eternal toll.